Well, hello there to all the good people of Ohio and beyond. This is Aaron Knapp, and you're tuned into Unplugged, broadcasting without permission. This is a place where the truth gets louder and we dig deeper, and where we always remember be lawful, not awful. If you want the full stories, the documents, the videos, and everything they don't want you to see, head on over to AaronKnappUnplugged.com, my new home for every investigation, every episode, and every update. And while you're here, be sure to like the video, follow the page, and hit subscribe, and share this with someone who needs the truth. We're building something real here. We're building something fearless, and we're doing it together. Welcome to Unplugged. Let's kick this thing off.
Plug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polished decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no.
Good evening there, Lorain County, Lorain City, and beyond. Sorry about the delay there. Takes a lot getting this thing together, I tell you what. Trying to make sure that I have everything in place. I was trying to start up something new with X tonight, Twitter, or whatever it is, but apparently you need a premium account to sign up with them, so kind of a little bit behind the times, I guess. And so anyway, well, we got tonight's coming up, and that's going to be all fun and dandy. We're going to talk a little bit more about what's been going on. Everybody wants to know what's going on with, with the city. Everyone wants to know what's going on with the ban from the public building. Now, I've had conversations with my legal counsel, Mr. Gargis. I've had conversations looking over case law, looking over everything. And to be honest, they don't have a leg to stand on. And what they did actually was to benefit me by giving me a heads up. That's what they plan to do. So tonight's episode, going to kind of cover some of this stuff that we've gone over. I know there's a question about what I filed. And I got a call today from Heather Chapin, or I should say an email, asking for a statement. And I politely declined. And I politely declined again when she asked if there was a police report number. If she'd done her actual research, she would know there was no police report number, because they refused to take my report. Now, a lot of people would argue, well, why don't you make one? Well, they don't take these types of reports online. Normal officers can't take them. The only one that can take them is command level, because it's about somebody that runs the police department in Ray Carrion. And it involved the guy that pays for the police department, Anthony DeMacchia. So I can't just report this to, Joe Schmo on the corner. They did send a supervisor to my house the next day after refusing to take my police report. The chief of police, who is legally by law required to take my report, failed to send an officer out or do anything, didn't care. I get it. I'm a pain in the ass, so I don't deserve any city services. I don't deserve to have reports taken. I don't deserve to have the services that my tax dollars pay for. I get it. Screw Aaron. That's cool. But you sent a sergeant to my house, a 3-striper, to hand deliver a letter like he was the city's little bitch. And you couldn't take a report? So no, Heather, there's no police report that I know of. Well, I'm sure they filed one on their own because they're busy concocting whatever story they want to concoct to do what they want to do. I noticed that there's a lot of people online that are commenting. Right now, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to comment thanks to a recent post that apparently had some words in it that Facebook didn't like, and so now I'm not able to share links. And on one page or two pages in particular, I'm not allowed to comment or reply to comments. I guess because I had to answer so many people's comments that what best we can figure out is Facebook blocked me from commenting or replying because I had to answer like 45, 50 replies on other pages. Now I can still comment on my own page and reply on my own page, but not on any other page because I posted that and everybody was talking schmack and I was trying to answer everybody's, comments. So hopefully this will also address some of those comments tonight in this podcast. So tonight's gonna be about you work for us, speech, public buildings, and the line the government is not supposed to, cannot cross, right? It cannot cross it. I want to be specific, not say not supposed to, because it cannot. It's legally bound to not cross that line. So let's set that tone right off the bat. We're going to look at this whole thing, and we're going to start with something simple, just to get the tone, the scope, and framing of the conversation down. But before we do that, I want to pause this. I see there's some comments. I want to have my comments up and flowing so I can see. Ah, thanks. I love that you call him Reverend Williams, Robert. That's a whole lot of that's a whole lot of respect for somebody that doesn't really deserve it. But anyway, all right. So I see my comments over there now. I'll try to keep an eye on those in case anybody has anything to say. So we'll put them on the stage here in the meantime. And I'm going to go back to my banners, my media assets. All right. So let's start with something simple because the core of the situation really is not complicated once you strip away all the noise. And I did that in my podcast the other day or yesterday when I stripped away all the noise and muted the audio of the incident in the hallway. And when you mute the audio, it tells you everything you need to know because words aren't violence. And the bottom line is you cannot have a situation where a government official engages in physical contact with someone. And then the same government structure that employs that official decides what happened, writes the narrative, imposes the consequences on the other person. That's not how accountability is supposed to work. That's not how due process is supposed to work. And yet that's exactly what we're dealing with here. The very office in Ray Carrion, Safety Service Director's office, the very same person that chest bumped me and slammed a door on me is literally also the same office that sent me a letter saying I was no longer allowed on municipal property. I mean, let that sink in. They investigated themselves. What? Come on. And the bottom line is that you're talking about they just said it was to de-escalate. I mean, it was a bunch of word malarkey. What I think happened was Tim Williams got a little ahead of himself, wrote something out, or maybe even at the Safety Service Director's directive wrote something out, sent it out, CC'd everybody as seen in the letter. Once they got it, they realized what he had done, and then they had to backtrack and back it up. Because if you notice, while Bradley says it stands, he also states that if a court of neutral obligation just deems it's unnecessary, he'll go with whatever that court says. Well, yeah, he will. And you guys know that's what's going to happen. That's what this podcast is about, just for the record. I found not one piece of legal findings out there that can show any way, shape, or form that this isn't First Amendment protected speech. And come on, guys, like, you say what you want about me. You can call me names online. You can, say I'm a troublemaker. You can say I do this. I'm attending to whatever you want to say. But I don't come to these situations unprepared or unknowing. I already know Lorraine's whole MO. They showed it to me with Larry Swanger when he put hands on me. Now, I've just, and it's just gone on from there. Every single step of the way that you guys have been trying to get me has always started with you touching me. So while I don't like being touched, I have learned to turn it off. And it's shown no better than when Ray Carrion flips around in that video and gets right here and smiles at me. I smiled back. I turned it off, folks. Once I realize a problem, I'm going to fix it. That's, I assumed you guys would have a respect enough to not do that to me, but obviously Ray does not. Now, previous versions of Aaron probably would have laid him out. Of course, previous versions of Aaron also wouldn't have taken the beating that I had taken. But you guys make jokes about that. He must like it. No, I don't like being beat up. What I like is making my own decisions. I like to be able to say, you know what? You may choose to fight, but I can choose not to. I can choose not to be physical. And when I used to not really have that choice, not only in the military, but later with the way I reacted to things, gaining that choice, that power over choice again, for me is important. So, yeah, sure, I don't like getting beat up, but I don't care enough to worry about, oh, you guys did this to me. What I'm doing is I'm saying, hey, you do what you do, I do what I do. That's how this works. But accountability is not supposed to work that way. Due process is not supposed to work that way, and here we are. So this is not going to be a quick reaction tonight, guys. It's going to be a surface level breakdown of a few seconds of video. No, it's not going to be that. It's going to be full discussion about laws, rights, public space, and what happens when those lines are tested in real time. Because the video matters, the body camera angle matters, the transcript matters, but none of those things exist in isolation, people. They only make sense when they're placed inside the framework that actually governs them, which is the Constitution, Ohio law, and the way the courts analyze governmental conduct. That's the part that's missing from most of the conversation right now, and most of it's online or in the Communist Chronicle. And that's the thing that's missing from most of what the conversation is. We're all reacting to a moment. And what the law evaluates is a sequence. People set tone. The law looks at who moved, who initiated contact, what authority was being exercised, and whether that authority was used lawfully. And those are not the same things. And when you confuse them, you end up with conclusions that might feel right, but they're not supported by actual legal standards or laws or really anything. Really even common sense. Just for the record, feel free to share this out. I can't share right now at all. So share it. Share it on pages. Share it to your friends. Put it on your friends list for this podcast right now. Eventually people will get around to it, but I find people are live in here. I can react to questions that are popping in now. But I'm going to lay out the facts as they exist on the record. I'm going to explain the legal framework that kind of applies to those facts, and then we're going to get in and open it all up. That includes supported questions, critical questions, questions from people who disagree with me. The goal here is not to win an argument. The goal is to understand what the law actually allows and what it does not. Because there's been a whole lot of commentary, and a lot of that commentary from the peanut gallery is based on assumptions rather than the full record. With that short clip, no sequence that led to the clips, based on reactions rather than analysis and law. So let's slow it down, walk it through piece by piece. What was said, what was done, what the video actually shows, what the law requires, and where those things either line up or they do not. There are several key issues that frame everything that we're talking about tonight, right? And that's the right to speak, and more importantly, and specifically, the right to criticize government officials, i.e. Ray Karen. There is a right to access a public building, especially when that building is being used for public business, right? And there's a distinction between a structured public meeting and what, where certain content neutral rules can apply, like, time and place restrictions, comments germane to the topics at hand. Certain restrictions can apply in a limited public forum like a city hall. I mean, let's be honest. They've proven it before. They don't really even have to let us speak. But a public space like a hallway or an exit after a meeting ends, well, That's kind of different. That's where concept of disorderly conduct under Ohio law, where which is often misunderstood and frequently misapplied, i.e., Garen Petty, jackasses. Can't believe you guys did that. And you'll try to do it with me, but the difference is I won't cop a plea. I won't worry about whatever you decide at the local level because I know you'll find me guilty no matter what. What I'll do is I'll wait and I'll appeal it at the state and federal level and make you look like the jackasses that you are. I don't have, such a limited time frame as others may have. I have nothing but time thanks to you guys in the city and county. So we can do that all day long. But I promise you what I was doing was not disturbing. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been doing it. The tone, the sound, how you perceive it, the words within it, none of that matters constitutionally. All that matters is, did I make threats? Was I aggressive? Did I state fighting words? No, I didn't do any of those things. But did I get chest bumped and a door slammed on me? A door that's considered a public exit? Yes. By a public official? Yes. In the context of his duties? Apparently, because if he was giving an interview to Carissa, he was acting as the safety service director. So, and again, they argue that it was, disruption of city business, but there was no city business. It's 7:00 at night. City offices are closed. The only people there was the public and the few city officials that were there for the meeting. So, but there's the issue of that physical contact, right? We look at the public space of Ohio concepts of public spaces and what a hallway constitutes. And now we're going to get into what physical assault is, including what qualifies an assault when you're dealing even with minimum force or minimal force. And then there's another layer that cannot be ignored because it changes the entire analysis, guys. It's like when a government official acts, they're not acting as a private citizen. Never. They're just not. I mean, maybe when they're private citizens, but they're acting under what we commonly refer to as color of law. And that means their actions are subject to constitutional limits. It means their authority is defined and restricted by law. It means that what might be permissible for you or I, Joe Schmo, common citizen, is not necessarily permissible for someone acting in an official capacity. And this is where the situation becomes serious because we're dealing with not just an interaction between two individuals. This is a public official in a public building during and after a public meeting interacting with a member of the public who was engaged in news gathering. That's extremely important. This is a public official in a public building during and after a public meeting interacting with a member of the public who was engaged in news gathering, right? It is and was a public official in a public building during and after a public meeting interacting with me, a member of the public who was engaged in news gathering for my LLC media company. That is what we call commonly in legal, the media, the common sense, the everything world, a state action. And a state action is always subject to constitutional authority. Because here's where it becomes even more difficult to ignore what's happening. After the physical interaction, after the contact that's captured on video, right? The response was not an immediate neutral investigation conducted by an independent body. No. The response was to deny you a report in any way, shape, or form. They're like, no. And then the response was to ban me. An indefinite ban, right? Not a time frame, not a legal ban, not a real ban, I don't know. Isn't there a ban? No, maybe that's you ban the coffee. I don't know. An indefinite ban for municipal property issued through the same governmental structure connected to the official involved with the incident. So, it says right on the letter here. I get my glasses out for that. I can't read without glasses. Sorry. So it says right here on this letter, Department of Public Safety Service, City of Lorraine, 200 West Erie Avenue, 7th floor, Lorraine, Ohio, 44052. So it wasn't from the police. It wasn't from the mayor. It was from Ray's office. It was signed by Ray's subordinate, Mr. I guess, you guys like to call him Preacher. I like to call him Prick. And I'm pretty sure there's some people that would agree with me. Man never cracks a smile. He sits in the back, staring at me and glaring at me all the time. That night he was sticking his head out the door, making faces at me at another meeting. This guy's an ass. But he signs this letter for his boss that he sends to me and has a 3-striper, send me a thing that gives me the most broad, unethical, non-legal ban and an indefinite time of on all municipal property. Meaning I can't even go pay bills, pay taxes, do shit without calling the legal office or the mayor's office to get an escort. Give me a break. I'm not a child. Maybe if you gave Ray Carey on an escort and everybody just kept with him and was like, Ray, 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 Ray. I never end up hearing anyone have to say, Aaron, 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 Aaron. That's because I'm not a little bitch who goes and charges up in other people's faces. I will always keep space between me and others. You've never, ever, ever, ever had one interaction with me, any of you, where I've gotten in your face. I respect your space. The only reason, I can't even think of a reason for him to do that. He started to walk away. I started to walk. Now, again, we were all going in the same damn direction. I always go out that way. He could have stepped back into the office behind him with Carissa. Instead, they chose to walk out. I chose to keep following. I have to exit that way. I can say I'm going to follow as long as he's in a public building giving an interview in public spaces. That's the thing everyone wants to forget. This was a traditional public forum. And again, he's not average Joe Schmo. So all the rest of you in the comments, I said I try to answer some of them. I saw some of the comments in that Lorraine page. For one, yes, I am a military veteran. Yes, I did serve 2 years in the U.S. Army. Yes, it was during the first Gulf War. Yes, I'm disabled. Yes, I have service-connected injuries. Yes, I'm not going to get into what my disabilities are because I've already provided them to the city and I'm not required to go further than that. But I have talked about a little bit about my mental health because I think it's important for everyone to talk about their mental health. I do have traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress disorder, and anxiety. And I have alerted the city to that fact. And I told them, specifically Ray, I even said it on mic one night at a city council meeting. Whenever you approach me like that, whenever you yell at me like that, whenever you scream at me like that, whenever you get in my face like that, you're going to get a certain side of me that is not going to be pleasant for anyone. I'm never threatening, never violent. I freeze and I elevate my voice, like you're supposed to do when you're scaring a bear off, like seem bigger than it and rawr, rawr. So I didn't move. If you notice, if anybody was watching, which very few people were that are going to be on my side, if I go back, and I will, I have a body cam on that's on my back. So it's going to show if I step forward or backwards. And I know exactly what I did. I started to walk forwards. Ray stopped, spun around, came back towards me. And I was still walking. So as he stopped right in my face, I took one more step forward and caught the edge of his jacket, which he had now partially put on the floor as he walked up to me because he was holding it in his hand. It was his left hand. I'm not really sure. And he had spun around, and when you look at the video, because I'm not going to go showing it again, we all watched it yesterday, or if you watch my podcast, go back and watch it again. He spins around and comes right at me, and I'm even in the video watching it, I'm jumping back. So you can ignore what you want, but he hit me with the door. He hit me there. He chest bumped me there. And when you look at my back video camera, what you're going to see is I didn't move forward or backwards. I stood my ground and he hit me. I have 3 angles, folks. Three. One on the back, one on the angle up, one on the chest. The only thing I don't have is from my feet or my crotch, because feet would be illegal because that could look upstairs, places you're not supposed to see. And who puts a video camera on their crotch? Come on. I'm not looking to do, Aaron's crotch cam. So we got everything above the waist. Now I guess I could angle one down, but who wants to look at your feet? So, now we're right back to you're dealing with a public official in a public building during and after a public meeting, interacting with a member of the public who was engaged in news gathering, and you chest bumped him and slammed a door on him, an exit door that's clearly an exit door that everyone uses to enter and exit that common meeting hall area where constitutionally protected speech is tantamount to being protected within the guise of that city hall and that floor, especially before and after city hall meetings. The only time that we as the public have a chance to interact with our government officials in any way, shape, or form that's meaningful where we can get answers. And that was clearly indicated by the fact that the other newspaper person there on site was interviewing them, even though she wrote the story about this incident and was obviously a part of the story and obviously saw everything that went down. And obviously, in no way, shape, or form could be any sort of an non-impartial person on it. And then I get called by Heather Chapin this morning asking me what I filed and wanting to report. I don't. Why would I let the girl that reported me to the chief of police, the guy that initially started all this crap, report on it? So I said no comment twice. But an indefinite ban for municipal property issued through the same government structure, that's bad. Nothing else that should have come from the police or from the courts. I mean, it's the courts because it's illegal. That's why I don't think anyone had permission. I think, either Tim or Ray or both did this without permission in anger. I wouldn't put it past Ray. He seems to do a lot of things in anger without permission. Because that's when the situation moves beyond a disagreement about the facts and into questions about how things are processed. Because when the same system that's responsible for the conduct, the investigation, and the punishment, the question is not what happened. The question is whether that process in itself is fair, lawful, and consistent with constitutional requirements. Little hint, it's not. But it becomes more concerning when you consider this didn't occur in a vacuum. There had already been prior notice. There had already been prior communication about my disability. Ray had a playbook on exactly how to trigger me, and he did exactly what the playbook said. The only difference is when I gave it to them, I immediately knew they were going to use it. So I started making sure I wouldn't react to it anymore. So if nothing else, I have to thank you guys at City Hall for helping me finally overcome. I'm still jumpy as hell, but at least I know now when someone's coming straight at me like that, I won't flinch. So appreciate you, Ray. That's good to know. Even after you chest bump me, and I have a C5, C6, C7 neck fusion that could literally paralyze me at any time. And, because some of you were asking, what are your disabilities? Well, I got a steel plate in my right ankle. I got nerve damage down my entire right side. Pretty much can't half the time feel what's going on over there. And when I can't, it hurts like hell. Hearing issues. Speaking of which, I keep forgetting to put these in. Wherever they are. Where is my hearing? That's why I keep forgetting to put them in. Can't ever seem to find them. Wow. But, we can talk about the fact that I gave them paperwork that told them that under Title II of the American with Disabilities Act that they had obligations as public entities, that they were required to make reasonable modifications to their policies and practices when interacting with individuals with known disabilities, that I'd given them this notice 2 years prior, and then a year prior, and then at the time that it occurred last time with Mr. Carrion. They're required by federal law to consider that information when they make their decisions. They're not permitted to ignore it and then act as if they were never on notice in the first place, which they were. So you take all that together, and then this whole analysis changed. Sure, you guys can make it, you were doing this, you were doing that. Listen, of course my voice elevated after someone slammed a door on me that I was normally going out of. He's lucky, again, that I'm a normal human being now and I didn't get all violent or aggressive. I know so many people out there, we've seen it so many times, people getting hurt because people do aggressive, stupid things in public. How else can you classify someone slamming a door on another human being, a grown man hitting me with a door? And any other men out there that are watching this or watch it later that want to call me names, how would you react? I know most of you, from the reactions you do on the Lorraine Facebook page, would have been big, bad, and boisterous and said, I would have effed that mother effer up. Because that's how you act on Facebook, right? when in reality you would have cowed down in the moment. All I did was stand my ground, which under Ohio law is legal. I mean, honestly, he hit me with a door, and not a light door, and it wasn't just shutting. He slammed it on me, right on my right side that I just told you I barely can half the time not feel because of the nerve damage, which makes it very dangerous because I could get damage over there and never know it. He hit my right foot so hard. I mean, honestly, I don't really feel that foot. I was just in a disability meeting, hearing recently where they were measuring all the scars on that foot to figure out, basically disability levels for it. Because they're still trying to figure it out over the years after trying to fix things and do things. But hey, you're right, guys. My service doesn't matter. Whatever. It's not just about whether voices were raised or whether the moment looked uncomfortable on video either, guys. It's about if a government official like Ray Carrion, with prior notice of my disability, I mean, honestly, Stamakia knows too, engaged in physical contact that escalated to a physical interaction, and whether that response to the conduct was to restrict the rights of the person documenting me. It's not a question of opinion. It's just a question of law. That's why this conversation matters, because the outcome of this situation is not right. Just about one person, and never will be. It's about whether a government can control access to the public space based on how someone speaks, whether it can respond to criticism by exclusion, and whether it can define an incident in a way that avoids accountability. So tonight we're going to do just that, right? The right way, not the communist, Chronicles way. I mean, I know we want this to be Leningrad on the lake, and maybe soon it will be. The Soviet Empire will come down and take over everything for you. We're going to just have to go do it tonight the right way, though. Tonight we are going to go through this very long timeline. We're going to analyze all the movement, right? We are going to completely compare what is shown on video to what is being claimed. We are going to apply the First Amendment, Ohio law, and federal case law. And then we are going to open it up for discussion. Because that's how we do it here. Because it's not just about the moment. Stop talking like that. This is about what the law allows, what it prohibits, and what happens when those limits are tested. And with that, we're going to start at the very beginning of all of this. 33 minutes in, so we're going to take our first quick little break here and run a quick ad, and then I'll be right back. Please stay tuned. Segment 1, we're going to talk about what actually happened, timeline, and the physical movement, and we're going to talk about how it all went down so quickly in that hallway and why what they're trying to do now is so wrong and illegal. Oh, one more thing. While I'm gone, if anybody is watching, please share the podcast. Just share this page that you're watching it on or whatever, if it's YouTube. If it's Facebook, it probably won't share very well, so you have to go to the YouTube page to share it. That being said, also, if you have questions or anything you want me to answer now, later, in the end of the podcast, please be sure to add those in so I can see them and try to answer them before the podcast is up, because I do want to try to answer everyone's questions. But to be clear, I'm going to answer this several times during the podcast. It doesn't matter how you perceive how I spoke to my government officials. It just doesn't. I can curse, I can be loud, I can be soft, I can do whatever, as long as I'm not threatening them, as long as I'm not using fighting words, as long as I'm not yelling the word fire out. Everyone's been dealing with me long enough to know I'm loud. They know that's my default base setting. So when someone tells me I'm yelling, and then I say, would you like to see me yell? And they say yes, and then I yell, and then they try to use that against me. That seems like a pretty big dick move to me, Mr. Bradley. But hey, what do I know? You want to be a Richard? Go ahead and be a Nixon. I don't really care. But you're not going to make me out to be the bad guy saying, well, he yelled. Well, yes, I yelled after you said go ahead, because I asked you, do you want to hear me yell? And you said go ahead. Well, I had permission from the highest person in City Hall to yell. So are you telling me you set me up? Yes, of course that's what you're telling me. You're trying to use the totality of all of these different events. Problem is, as we'll discuss later in this episode, totality in speech incidences and things like that cannot be measured. You can't look at the previous incidences that you never charged me in and then hold them to a standard. You can't judge my current action based on any previous action. That's not constitutional. So we're going to play this first quick ad, and then we'll get right back to it. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorraine Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention DNC Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest up-to-date hip-hop artistry. Thank you for... All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in there through that little brief unpaid sponsorship. But I do like to support the people who have supported me along the way. And these are some of the people that have supported me and put up with my BS and my, whatever. Wins, losses, interruptions to live streams because I'm running my yacht because I get excited to see people. I'm human. I'm not perfect. I get it. Just like Ray, just like everyone else. Difference is I'm not a government official. And I always knew, like, when I went to Crossroads and I was working in my required field, there's a different side of me. I turned my normal side off. Like, I can't run around acting like Aaron at work. Like, that would be insane. And I imagine none of you do. When you guys talk about, well, is this like, no, I don't act that way at work. When you guys are out mowing, you're usually probably not out there, cussing up a storm and calling people names, right? When you're at the shop working at the counter, you don't get to say, fuck you very much, have a nice day, right? No, you have to act a certain way in public at your work. But beyond that, no. When I'm at my government officials, I don't have to do any of that. Not a thing. And that's what, what kind of cracks me up about all this is that people seem to put that onus on me, but not on themselves. So let's kind of talk about a little bit more about what happened, the timeline, the physical movement. We're going to slow it way down because this is where everything either stands or collapses. Before anyone starts talking about, before, the First Amendment, before anyone starts labeling conduct as disorderly, right? What this looked like. Because there's a threshold question that has to be answered. And if you don't answer that question, then you have a bigger problem. Hold on a second. I'm trying to share this podcast as well, but we're gonna go over what happened in order, and that's the big thing here. Is that go to my channel. Oh, no, I don't want notifications. I want to actually find. Oh, well, I'll deal with it in the next break. I was trying to share it out on my phone. Not what someone said happened, not what I said happened, not what he said would happen, not what someone felt happened, not what a quick video suggests happened, what the record shows when you watch it all the way through from beginning to end without cutting the parts out to make one side look better or the other. Because the law doesn't operate on impressions. Courts do not make decisions based on whether, who looked better in the moment, right? They just look at reconstructed events. They reconstruct them, actually. They look at sequence. or they follow it. They look at the movement. They look at the positioning of everybody. They look at the timing. And if you get that sequence wrong, then everything that follows is built on a false foundation, a false narrative. Right now, a lot of people are starting at the wrong point, right? You're starting with my reaction. They're starting at my raised voice, according to them, my voice, my normal voice. They're starting with the part of the video that is the easiest to isolate and the easiest to criticize. That's human nature. It's not legal analysis, but hey, this is a reaction, not a reconstruction. Right? That's what you're seeing there with them. You're looking at their reaction, not a reconstruction of the events. If you want to understand what happened, you have to go back to the beginning of the interaction and like work forward, right? Like investigate that shit. And when you do that, the first thing that matters is the distance. There's a point in the footage where it's, there's clear space between me and Ray. The distance is not a minor detail. It's a starting point for the entire analysis because the distance tells you one thing immediately. If two people are separated, then someone has to move to change that. Someone has to close the gap. The law cares about who does that because that's how you determine who initiated it. From there, you move to the next piece, which is the movement itself. There is a moment where Ray moves towards the doorway, right? Not away from me, not past me in a neutral way, towards the space that I'm currently occupying. That matters because, again, this is not about where two people end up. It's not about how they got, what they said. It's about how they got there. That moment signifies everything. Movement is not neutral. Aggressive movement is a choice, and it's very visible. You have, to look at his positioning, because this is where that whole central claim of theirs seems to fall apart. When you actually look at the record, I'm at or near the doorway, right? I'm standing in it. That is not a random location. That's an exit. It's the exit from the building, right? To get out, to leave, I have to go out of that building. The meeting's over. I asked the questions inside the hall. Neither he nor Mayor Bradley answered. I made some sarcastic marks that said, oh, no comment, no comment. Of course I made sarcastic marks. You guys blow me off. You leave me standing there with my, with my pecker in my hand. And what am I supposed to do? Thank you. Coming again on another day? No. You don't answer my emails, so I can't get anything questioned. That's why I have to make so many public records requests to write a story. But I didn't start. I'm not chasing someone down a hallway. I'm not cutting someone off in a corridor. I'm not jumping in front of him. I'm positioned at the point where you exit the building, which is exactly where anyone would want to be if they're leaving. That brings us to the claim that I was following. Because that claim only works if you ignore the sequence. It only works if you start the story in the middle and skip over the parts that show where people actually were. If I'm standing at an exit and someone leaves the building, then later that same person is present at the same exit area. The question is not whether I followed. The question is like who moved and when. From one room to another, I should say, is more like it. I'm standing at the exit of this room, this city hall council building room. We're all in one building. Ray's standing in the hallway connected to that room in front of an office that also had an open door about 3 feet from me. I get to the exit. I'm still talking to him. It has to be resolved by footage now. Now, unfortunately, my timestamps are off on my body camera, but we can look at what they are now to figure it out. But all you have to do is look at the clock on the wall. It was like, I think it was like 5 till 7 at one point, if that clock's actually working. There's a point where, Ray also leaves the area. That's part of the record. Because, when you look at whether I was following him or not, I stopped at the top of the ramp talk to Demakia for a minute and let Ray continue on his way to the end of the walkway, turn right into where he goes to exit. I gave him time to exit. All right. I recognized he was hot after he got in my face the second time, and I didn't continue to follow. As you know, I just stopped right there at the corner point. And so that's where the proximity changes. And the law doesn't ask, when it comes to contact, whether there was just contact. It asks how that contact occurred, asks who was advancing, who was stationary, who was reacting. All those questions are going to determine whether the contact was incidental, mutual, or initiated by one party. That's why the closing of distance in these scenarios matters so much. If one person in Ray is standing far away and leaning on a wall, and another person and me is standing in the doorway, I wouldn't say far away. It's a good 2-3 feet. Even more than that, I have to imagine. And if one person's standing in place and the other person moves into that space, i.e. Ray moved into my space, that's different than two people moving towards each other at the same time. There are two completely different factual scenarios, and the legal analysis changes depending on which one supports the evidence. And you're going to see which one supports the evidence if you try to take me to court on this, because I have the back video camera that's going to show whether or not I was moving forward, moving backwards, because it won't have Ray in the frame. It doesn't have Ray in the frame. It's my newer camera, and it slides onto the back. So I'll be able to tell whether I move forward or backwards to a complete and rational extent. And I can promise you, if I filed the court case, I always act like I don't know anything. But think about it. If I filed the court case, do you think I don't know anything about that back body cam and what it shows? And who was looking, who was coming. So when a body cam is, being physically moved, jolted, or shifted, it's not just a visual detail. It's actually physical evidence, right? My front cam as well. You hear it, the physical contact when he chest bumps me. It's part of a sequence. It's something that has been lined up with the movement and posturing to understand what's actually happening in the moment, right? You look at the different angles. You got this one looking right at him coming. You see the I'm holding this in my hand, right? I've got it like this. When the door hits me, it comes up like this, and you see kind of Ray over it, and then I have a frame on one of the ones where it's just all black. And then on this, you kind of see the door almost closing, but my foot's there because I'm walking through the door. Okay, imagine the door opens like this. So when the door closed, if I'm already through the door, when he got to it and hit it, my foot was in the door already. I was already walking through. I had my left foot in the doorway, my right foot past the doorway threshold, already in past the threshold of the doorway when the door hit me. Because the body cam doesn't show the door completely closing. The body cam still sees him the whole time. Even my camera still sees his head over the top of the magazine. The reason why this went up was because the door closed in at an angle on my arm. My arm's holding this, and so as soon as it closed in on my arm, see how that works? Sorry, I'm looking at the camera video, what I'm doing, and my camera's right there. So when you look at that and piece them together, which again, when everyone first started making their comments, I hadn't released the body cam footage from the front yet. I'd only released the live footage. Well, I hadn't even released any footage. The live footage is what went out. So everybody had just the live footage and they heard what I said. And that's all anyone focused on. And again, for the record, guys, listen. You see how I talk in these sessions. You see how I act in public. You see what I do. You see the things I've accomplished. And you can call me a lot of things, an a-hole, crazy, whatever you want to call me. I really don't care. As I've stated lately, winning a popularity contest in Lorain, Ohio was never on my box of, my check box for, bucket list stuff. Winning a popularity contest anywhere never was on my list. I don't care. What I do care about is upholding the Constitution. Many things in my life that I failed at and been forced to educate myself further and learn about. The one thing I've never failed at is supporting and knowing the Constitution of the United States of America, and I don't plan on starting today. If I did something, I'll pay for it. If I don't, I won't. But you're not going to go and clearly dispute video evidence that shows he hit me with his chest, jolted me. And yes, when we talk about my disability, I'm 80% right now, working on the 100. I have T-spine injury, which is my upper back. I have a neck injury, C5, C6, C7. I have a steel plate in my right ankle, which he slammed the door on. I have nerve damage all up and down my right side, which he slammed into me. My body still hurts from the ass kicking I took at the madhouse. So yeah, there's that. I still have bruise marks on my knees from that incident. You know, you guys act like, oh, you're supposed to be so tough. I'm 52 years old, bro. My body has been through the ringer and back. The fact that I'm still up and moving is a medical miracle. So when you guys ask why I don't fight, well, fuck off. I don't have to fight. I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm not here for your entertainment. You don't have to kick my ass tonight. So I just, you may not like what I was saying or how I was saying it. You may think me saying the way I said it was, if you don't know what PTSD, ADHD, and all these things present as in the moment, when Ray is yelling, I'm not your civil servant, and he's coming at me and slamming a door on me and still going off on me, my brain sticks in that kind of a mode. So I'll just repeat. Yeah, see how that works? It's from my anxiety. And I told them all that when I sent them all those, dedicated letters, giving them full disclosure, begging them, especially Ray, to not do what he did. And then Ray turned around and did exactly what he did because he did not like what I was saying or the content of my speech. And so it's physical evidence. It doesn't prove intent on its own, but that body cam movement and that thud that you hear is an indicator that contact occurred. Plus, I have the back video cam that I haven't released yet. And again, it's a masterpiece. Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. I see. It is a piece of the sequence, folks. And it's something that has to be lined up with the movement and positioning to understand what actually happened in that moment. There are multiple camera angles, and they become essential, not optional. That's why I have 3 now. I mean, I've got that little dog cam, too, that I usually keep hidden on myself. So, I'm not going in there into a hallway with nothing but people that hate me and a door closed without cameras everywhere because they don't have one to protect anyone in that hallway. One camera can show you a moment, but multiple cameras can show you a sequence of events. A forward-facing camera might show the distance and facial orientation. A chest-mounted camera might show the moment of impact as it does. A rear camera might show who approached from behind or who turned back, and whether or not I was moving forwards, backwards, or at all. Because each angle adds information, and when those angles are consistent with each other, they reinforce the reconstruction of the events. This is not about which clip works the worst. It's about how all the footage fits together. Because when you put those pieces together, what you're doing is you're building a timeline that's based not on opinion. It's based on what you can actually see, measure, and verify. Now, if law enforcement gave 2 shits about this, they would have come and asked me for my footage. I've given them now 2 parts online. I'm going to see if they come and finally decide to take a report and take the 3rd copy. But the thing is, I don't think they'll do their job. I think they're liars. They've proven themselves to be. They've never been able to charge anyone. I gave them all the facts on McCann. They did nothing. Now I've given them all the facts on Carry On. They'll do nothing. They don't care about us, the people, or at least me. And that's fine. Ray even told me that. Aaron, sometimes it's the asker, not the ask. Roger that, Ray. When you put all those pieces together, you're just building a timeline that's based on what can actually be seen and verified. And that has to be understood before we move on. It's not a narrative. It's about sequence. We're going to establish sequence once you have determined who moved, who closed that distance, He's closing the distance. He's ready to win. And how the contact occurred, then and only then can you applying the law in a way that actually reflects what happened. Anything else is just guesswork dressed up as, certainty, which is a typical Lorraine report. I'm going to try here at the end of each little segment that I'm doing before I stop and break on each one to do like what I call a little open forum, right? Where I kind of break some stuff down. And I know I do that throughout, but and discuss things. So I have some talking points here that I wanted to talk about for this one. And it's going to be, I just feel like the timeline itself is not something that you have to take on faith. It's something that we see, we can interpret, we can question. What questions would people have about the sequence itself? Not the conclusions, but, the order of events. Looking at the order of events in a specific way that allows you to see it contextually, timeline-wise. Let's see what we got here. Let's see what I got here. Comments. Yes, Richard, I would agree. Correct. He is a paid servant, and they care about our money, not just mine. They care about all of our money, our tax money, especially when they were just talking at the last council meeting about how they're going to go after your tax dollars and start, having you guys taken to court over it. That's what I said. You're correct. They don't want to do what they're required to do by law. And they literally want all of our money. They want your money, my money, all our money, the tax dollar. That's all they care about is and not how they get it, but that they get it, And when you watch the footage, I would say what stands out in terms of movement, and do you see one person advancing? Do you see both moving? Do you see a break in the interaction followed by a re-engagement? Do you think that matters even in determining responsibility, or do you believe that once contact happens, everything before it stops matters? There's multiple camera angles. What would you want to see to make that timeline clear? Would you be looking for positioning? Would you be looking for who turned? Would you be looking for who closed the gap? I agree that. You guys have seen the video. You clearly see, especially if you watched the last podcast, you would have seen how when you turn off the sound, it's totally different. And so you turn off the sound on the video and you see Ray close the door on me, right? Then he returns to his bag and his jacket. So that's interaction one. Then he starts walking up the causeway there, and I start walking up the causeway. And then that's when you see the quick spin and the get in my face, the chest bump, all of that. Just right there. I don't even understand why he thought that behavior was, you know what? I honestly don't believe he was. And someone said earlier, brilliant, you really, well, I don't mean, I don't feel like I can make anyone do anything. Because if you can make someone do something, don't you guys think in that moment Ray would have made me hit him? You can't do something that you're not pre-programmed to do. So in a moment where I was struck with the door, and in a secondary moment where a man got right in my face, inches away to where I could smell his coffee breath. If I have no sense of smell, I could feel his hot breath on me as he looked at me. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I didn't hit him. I didn't push him. I didn't push him back. Kept my hands by my side. I never talked to him once. Physically touched him once. Yeah, he chest bumped me. Yes, exactly, Richard. That's what I'm saying to people. Like, and I've said this all along for the naysayers in the Lorraine page that will go and say, and you've seen them, I'm sure, where they're, saying all these things about me. I'm going, okay, if we go based off of the general consensus of the male prerogative in the city of Lorraine, do you think more or less people in the city of Lorraine would say, I will whip his I would knock his in the dirt. I would wrap him up. I would roll him up. They say all these violent things about that, right? Just like leave it to your imagination. Lorraine is obviously not a talk it out kind of city. I found that out the hard way. I mean, when people talk about me and they say, hey, Aaron, like, you're instigating, you're this, you're that, you're the other. How about this? If you compare this, use a Star Trek analogy, right? I know everybody knows Star Trek, whether you like it or you hate it. And think about it this way: you got Picard and you got Kirk, and there's always been this ongoing debate of who would win, and everyone knows it would be Kirk, because Kirk would stand there, and then on the other side you'd have Picard. Picard would be like, "Listen, let's talk this out." And before Picard even got talk this out finished, Kirk would have pulled out his phaser and shot him or hit him with a rock. Or if Picard was a girl, you just flash to another scene and you putting on his boots. Shoot it, kill it, or F it. That was Kirk. Picard, on the other hand, no, I would have been Picard. I would have been standing there trying to talk it out with them, and they would have shot me. And that's the way it goes. Like, laser, whatever, phasered me. And so when I look at it that way, I go, no, because I'm going to talk it out. I'm past the point of being a warrior. I stopped doing that. I no longer have that charge by my government to cause harm to others. And I take that seriously. Like, without a standing order to harm the citizens of the United States of America, even ones I don't like, it just feels wrong. But what, I go and do all this stuff and then I come back and beat up on American citizens? No. And the thing is everyone goes, well, why wouldn't you fight back? Well, what's every headline about a veteran say when he fights back? Unhinged, crazy veteran. And you guys are already saying that. So if I ever hit anybody back, I'm doing a disservice to all other veterans. So if you hit me, I'm just going to let you hit me. Maybe you'll finish the job that no one else has. I don't know. I don't get to decide that. A higher power decides when I come or go, and what you do and what I do. According to many, we're not really in control of our destinies as much. Like, it's predetermined time and outcome. I don't know, but that's where when I look at all this, the case is built. It's not on reactions. It's on sequence, folks. It's on the timing of it, the way he turned around, the way he came back at me. Looking at it the way we did in the last one with no sound. I mean, I challenge you, watch the video with no sound. Ray turns around on me so quickly, and he is so quickly in my face. I'm like, it is one of those moments where if I was on city council, I'd be like at the end, when they're always patting each other on the back, I'd be like, I just really want to point out and thank Aaron himself. I know that's me, but I'm going to use my name in the third person. For how well he handled having Ray come at him like that. And, Ray got right in his face and he just stood there stoically and took it. And, he's just, we really appreciate the way he handles himself when he's in a public situation and doesn't end up hitting someone when they get so close to him. That's really good of him. So, when you do that and you remove the sound, I just want you to know, if you remove the sound, it's one of the most important ways to see what actually happened. Go watch the video, take the sound out. Because the moment you remove the audio, you remove the distraction. You remove the tone, you remove the volume, you remove the parts of the video that triggers people emotionally and causes them to make snap judgments. We don't like Aaron. We don't like the way he talks. We don't like what he says. We don't like what he does. But what you're left with when you take all the sound away, when you just play the video, is movement, position, direction, speed, and space. That's it. And those are the things that the law actually cares about when it comes to an assault. So you think about what you saw when we watched it without sound, without audio. There's no yelling, there's no frustration, there's no tone to react to. There's only the physical interaction between two men in a public space. And that's and what stands out immediately there is how quickly the movement happens. There's movement where there is space. There is movement where there is orientation. And then there's a very quick change, a turn, a shift, a sudden, suddenly that space is just gone. You know, and then it's not a slow incidental movement. It's not someone casually repositioning. It's fast turn, direct turn, a closing of a distance that happened almost immediately after the turn. 1 second there's space, the next he's right in front of me. And when you watch it without sound, that moment becomes more clear because you're not being pulled into whatever's being said by yours truly or others. And the mics are right here on me, so you hear me. And I'm already loud. You hear me even without the mics. But you're not focusing on the words when you turn it down. You're focusing on the body's in motion. Now it's your body in motion. It starts to look like a fit or a convulsion. Anyone can do this dance. This is my dance, y'all. Humpty Hump's my name. No two people will do it the same. You got to doubt when you appear to be insane. Humping, jumping. You can see the direction. You can see the intent through the movement. You can see the distance is not closed by accident. It's changed. It is closed by a change in direction, right? It really is like a step into that space. He just is there. And that matters because this is where the analysis is always going to shift away from narrative and into something you can actually observe and prove. People are going to say a lot of things about tone, mine especially. They're going to say a lot of things about attitude, mine especially. They'll say a lot of things about what they think I was feeling, Ray was feeling in that moment. I've already said what I think he was feeling in that moment. But when you take the sound away, none of that exists anymore. All you're left with is a very simple question. Who moved into whose space? And when you watch it that way, when you strip it down, just a visual sequence, you see that charge happened in real time and that change happened in real time. And you can see the movement, where the direction shifts and the distance closes. Ray literally had to make a decision to set his jacket and his briefcase down or bag down first. You can see how suddenly the proximity is created, how he moved from that wall to that door and then tried to shut it on me while I was already basically through it. It hit me. The reason it hit my foot was because I pushed it out a little bit further so it wouldn't hit my arm and shoulder. That thing has a big wooden, I don't know. I feel like it has like a thingamajigger on it. I don't know. All I know is it hit me and it didn't feel good on my foot. I dang sure didn't want it to hit my inside of my arm. They skip over that. They skip over the closing of space. They jump right to the reaction because that's what stands out, right? The law doesn't start with the reaction. It starts with what led to it, Because in grand scheme of things, like, what? Because I yelled, ow, I'm in trouble? No. The law starts with what led to it, and when you watch it without sound, you're not going to be asking whether someone sounded aggressive. You're not asking whether someone was loud. You're asking a much more grounded question, the one that the law actually wants to know. Who initiated the physical proximity? And once that's answered, everything else can be understood in a light of that. Like, who initiated physical proximity and who initiated physical contact. Because reactions do not happen in a vacuum. They happen in a response to something. And if you ignore the approach, you ignore the turn. If you ignore how quickly someone goes from being at a distance to being right in your face, then you're ignoring the part of all of this sequence that actually matters and explains all the rest of what happened. That's why watching it without sound will help you. It matters. It reinforces and forces you to see what actually happened, not just what it felt like, or just because you don't like the sound of my voice. Now, I want to hear from you guys on this, and because it's something that anyone can do on their own. If you take the video and you mute it, and you do notice what you did not notice before. Did you see the turn? Did you see the change in direction? Did you see how quickly the distance closes? Do you think removing the audio changes how you interpret what happened, or do you think it stays the same? More importantly, when you focus only on the movement, what do you think matters more? The words that are said or the physical actions that are taking place? There are a few minutes, take a few minutes here to think about, what you really think about, because this is where the difference between perception and analysis starts to become clear. And again, I asked you these questions at the end. You can feel free to ask them later in the chat. You can feel free to ask them if you watch this later in the chat. I'm just trying to give some thoughts out there. You can answer, you can, send me messages, or you can ask me to respond now. Yes, they do know the light shining down on them. I would have to agree with you. Getting the door slammed when on you when the people you elected to service is a great lawsuit to impeachment. Now in Ray's case, he wasn't elected; he was appointed by Mayor Bradley, but Mayor Bradley was elected. So vis-a-vis, Ray Carrion may not be an elected official; he's an appointed official by an elected official. Tomato, right? But I do like to be specific. But we do need less government. I lean more towards going back to being just thinking libertarian all the time. And but I wanted to answer those questions before I moved on. Again, take some minutes here. I'm gonna take a quick break to think about these questions. Doesn't matter who closed the distance. Doesn't matter who made contact. And why? Why are we still dealing with this scenario continuing to happen? I just don't get it. I don't get why we would continue to have people doing these kind of things. Why Ray in 2026, or anyone, Santa Claus, anyone, thinks beating the shit out of somebody is the okay answer, or laying on top of them, or throwing them to the ground, or slamming doors on them, or chest bumping them. I'm never going to give you a look. If I didn't react when, Fatso Santa Claus laid on top of me, other than to bite him because I couldn't breathe, because, you got 320 pounds of god-awful man laying on top of your 170-pound ass, and see if you can still breathe or do anything. But, then we get in, the idea of the First Amendment and the right to speak, right? Because that's what we're going to do in our next segment is First Amendment and the right to speak. So please stay tuned for this quick ad from our sponsors. Hey there, folks. Aaron here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I want to give you a quick reminder for everyone watching that the City of Lorain holds its regular City Council meetings on the first and third Monday of every month. And those meetings are not just for council members. They are for residents. If you care about what happens in your city, and if you speak or want to speak on an issue, ask a question, or simply be present and informed, showing up matters. Participation matters. Even sitting in the room and listening matters. You do not need to be an expert on any of this. You do not need permission to care. You do not need to do anything other than just show up. So check the agenda, folks. Mark your calendar. And if something affects your neighborhood, your family, or your future, take a seat, raise your hand, and make your voice part of the record. Lorain City Council, first and third Monday. Your city, your meetings. Those council meetings start at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're held inside of City Hall. Make sure you attend this Monday's meeting. Hey there, folks.
Down to all of our departments and assure that as part of our regular checklist that we have for many projects, that we can visit this. This is not a common area because we typically don't waive fees. So it's one of those areas that we'll revisit here as we move along.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion.
Say something? Then why aren't we? Say something? Then why are we? You want to get an attitude? You work for me, Carry On. Yeah, get it. Do it.
Asking, I'm in a public area, bro.
Pretty soon what he's going to do is he's going to say that he can't continue with the meeting because you won't exit
And
the
that's not my
chambers.
problem. You work for me.
I don't work for you.
You do work for me. I pay taxes. You work for the city of
We can
Lorraine.
agree to disagree.
No, there's no agree to disagree, Mayor.
we can.
Mayor, there's no agree to disagree.
And what they're going to do is they'll just close the meeting.
All righty. Well, we're back here for our next section. And we get back down to the First Amendment and your right to speak. The foundation of everything being discussed here begins with the First Amendment, right? And not just a talking point or a phrase that people like to repeat, right? It's a structural limit on the government and its power. It exists specifically to protect the ability of individuals to speak to, criticize, and challenge the government without fear of punishment simply because that speech is uncomfortable, inconvenient, or unwanted. Now, that protection is not secondary. It's central to how accountability is supposed to function. If citizens cannot question officials directly, then the concept of public service loses its meaning. There is a common misunderstanding that comes up in situations like this, right? And it's one that gets repeated often enough that people start to accept it as true. The idea is that speech becomes legal or illegal, when it's loud, when it's aggressive, or when it makes someone uncomfortable. Well, that's not the legal standard, folks. The law does not protect polite speech. The law protects speech that people may not like. It protects speech that may be frustrating to hear. It protects speech that challenges authority. That's the entire point. The courts have been very clear on this for decades. Speech directed at the government and at government officials, even when it's harsh, even when it includes profanity, is generally protected. That includes questioning, criticism, persistent attempts to get an answer. The government does not have the authority to silence someone simply because it does not like the tone or the content of what is being said. If that were the standard, the First Amendment would not even function as a protection at all. It would function as permission that could be revoked whenever daddy, found the convenient speech to becoming inconvenient, right? That doesn't mean that there are no limits. It just, because there are true threats, they're not protected. Incitement to immediate violence, that's not protected. There's a very narrow category of what courts have called fighting words, but even that category is extremely limited and rarely applies in modern cases. Those are specific legal thresholds that require more than a raised voices or a strong language. They require something more, something that requires a real and immediate risk of harm. And that distinction matters because it separates expression from conduct. Speaking loudly is not the same as threatening someone. Criticizing an official is not the same as initiating violence. Being present or persistent is not the same as being unlawful. Those differences are not just theoretical. They are what determine whether conduct is protected or not. They are also an important difference for those between what's happening during a formal meeting and what happens after the meeting ends in the hallway outside. During a council meeting, there's rules, folks. There are rules that are designed to allow the government to conduct business in a very orderly fashion, right? People are typically required to go to a podium to be recognized, to speak with a time limit, to follow certain procedures. Those rules are allowed because they must be applied in a very content neutral way. They cannot be used to silence a particular viewpoint because, they have to be viewpoint neutral. Once the meeting ends, the legal landscape then begins to change. You're not in a structured form designed for the conduct of official business anymore. You're in a generic public space. That shift actually is not generic because that shift matters because the government's authority to regulate speech is much more limited in the general space than it is during a formal meeting. That brings us back to where this actually happened. This was not inside the meeting. This was not during public comment. This was not at a podium with a timer running. This was inside City Hall on a public ramp at one of the primary entry and exit points of the building, or at least that giant area of City Hall. That's not a restricted area. That's a controlled, not even a controlled speaking environment. It's a place where the public is permitted to be and where an interaction between citizens and officials naturally occurs. And there is another detail that matters just as much. In the frame behind the official, there is an open office door. That's a private space. That's where someone goes if they want to disengage. That's where someone goes if they want to end an interaction. That option existed for him. It was available. It was visible. You could see it on the body cam footage. You could see it on my chest cam footage, but it wasn't used. Instead, the interaction remained in the public access point, right? It remained in the doorway. It remained in the space where the public has a right to stand, move, and speak. That choice matters because the law is going to look at who is using the public space and who has the ability to step away from it. The Constitution does not require a citizen retreat from a public space simply because a public official does not like doesn't want to answer questions, or if anything, the structure is the opposite. Public officials are the ones who hold the authority, and the ones that authority comes to with the expectation that they will encounter the public, including people who ask difficult questions, persistent questions, people like me. That doesn't mean an official has to respond. I get it. No one's ever required to answer every question, but declining to answer is very different than trying to control the space itself. It's very different from treating a public access point as if it were a private area where interaction can be shut down on command. That's where this line was crossed and where it becomes important. Because once speech is taking place in a public space, and once that speech does not cross into threats or incitement, the government's ability to restrict that free speech is extremely limited. It cannot be based on annoyance. It cannot be based on discomfort. It cannot be based on the identity of the person speaking or the viewpoint they're expressing. Speech alone is not crime. Speaking to a public official in a public building is not a crime. Asking questions, even repeatedly, is not a crime. The First Amendment does not disappear because someone raises their voice or because the interaction is not convenient for the person being asked to respond. And that's the starting point for everything else. Because if speech itself is protected, then the question shifts. It becomes about what happens in response to the speech. Whether the government's reaction crosses the line, the Constitution does not allow that. So now we're going to get into asking some questions here, and I'll check my comments and see if there's any answers, because we're going to go into our next little forum break here where it gives you guys an opportunity to ask any or answer any questions that may be asked right now. So what does it mean to criticize a public official in a public space? Where do you believe the line exists between protected speech and unlawful conduct? Should the tone of speech determine whether it's protected or not? And just think about these things as they apply to real world events before we start our next section. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like to thank our sponsors. We have a few unofficial sponsors tonight, and they are definitely not paid sponsorships. I want to throw out there a big thank you to Joseph Jones and Eric Jones of the Lorraine Daily and the Vermilion Daily. They have a local news page. You should check them out. They do plenty of great work broadcasting all the news that is the news that you want to have in Lorain and Lorain County. So check them out. Also, please, if you need any legal services, feel free to reach out to Robert Gargas. You can find him listed online. He's a fine attorney and comes highly recommended by yours truly. And last but not least, I want to mention D&C Radio. Please make sure you check out one of the up-and-coming internet hip-hop stations and all of their shows. They put on a lot of shows. You have
the Never Outdone show. You also have the Eric Bowen show, Speak Up, Speak Out. So please make sure you guys check them out as well if you're looking for your latest and up-to-date hip-hop artistry. Thank you for tuning in. This has been a non-paid sponsorship brought to you by Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. Here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp, we like...
Welcome back, folks. Next segment is going to be on public forum doctrine. We're going to talk about what changes after a meeting, so we can kind of explain it to people. I get it. Some of this stuff might be a little on the boring side, but these are the facts of the matter, and this is why it matters. Public forum doctrine and how it changes, when the meeting ends is there's this legal concept and it controls everything that we're dealing with in this situation. Again, this is not legal advice. I'm not an attorney. Please seek an attorney if you have any questions about legal forum or legal contact or public forum doctrine or why it changes. This is my interpretation. It is not considered to be any sort of legal advice. You get that? No legal advice here. Cannot do, there's certain things the government cannot do even when it comes to speech. The concept is called forum analysis. It sounds technical, but the idea is pretty straightforward. It's just not all public spaces are treated the same under the law. And the level of control the government has depends entirely on what type of space you occupy in that moment. And that's super important, folks. Like, you have to understand that. Like, if you don't get that, everything else changes. So when you're in the city council meeting itself, that's when the law calls a limited public forum. That means the government's allowed to impose reasonable restrictions on speech in order to conduct business. People have to be recognized before speaking. They have to come up on the mic. They may be required to go to a mic stand or a podium. There may be time limits. In this case, there's 2 minutes at the Lorraine City Council meetings. Those rules are permitted because the government has a legitimate interest in maintaining order, so it can carry out its official fiduciary duties. However, even in that setting, those rules must be applied in a very viewpoint neutral way. They cannot be used to silence someone simply because, their speech or their message is unpopular or critical. But the moment the meeting ends, the legal justification for those restrictions changes. Government is no longer engaged in any sort of formal conduct of business that requires that same level of control. The structured environment is gone, and with it, the authority to regulate speech in the same way. That does not mean that there are two rules at all. What it does mean is that the threshold for restricting speech becomes significantly higher. Now you're in a different type of space. That's where forum analysis becomes critical. The law recognizes what is called a traditional public forum. These are places that have historically been open to the public expression, open to, places like streets, sidewalks, and parks, all the places that they're trying to ban me from. In those spaces, speech receives the highest level of constitutional protection, and the government's ability to restrict it is extremely limited. And a government building like City Hall, well, it's more complex because it's not a single type of forum. It contains different spaces that serve different purposes. Council chamber during a meeting is a limited public forum. A private office is not a public forum at all. But areas like hallways, lobbies, entryways, and public access points function much closer to a traditional public forum, or at minimum, non-restricted public spaces. These are places where the public is expected to be, where a movement is open, and where interaction between citizens and officials naturally will occur. That distinction matters because once you are in that space, once you leave that restricted forum and you go into this publicly unrestricted area, you're in an area that functions as a traditional or general public forum. The government cannot simply apply the same rules to you that it had inside the meeting. It can't require you to speak only when recognized. It cannot limit you to a podium. It does not exist in that space. It cannot impose meeting procedures in that area where the procedures have no practical or legal basis. This is where the confusion happens, where people assume that because you're still inside the same building, that the same rules apply everywhere. That's not how the law works. The classification of the forum is not based on the building itself. It's based on the specific space within that building and how that space is used. So when you leave a council meeting and step into a hallway or on a ramp or into an entryway, you're no longer in a limited public forum. That's how it works, folks. You're now in a public space. Oops. And that's an area where the public has a right to be, and where speech is afforded so much broader protections. The rules that govern your speech, your speech inside a meeting, right? They don't automatically follow you into that space or out of it. And again, we have to bring this back to the facts. The interaction did not occur in a controlled environment. It did not control a podium. It did not occur during any sort of a formal meeting or session. It occurred in City Hall on an exit ramp at a primary entry exit point that's used by the public. That's not a restricted area. That's not a space designated for controlled speech. It's a public access point. That means the legal analysis changes, in my opinion, not legal advice. You are not looking at whether someone followed meeting rules. You are looking at whether speech in a public space crossed in the line into something that's not protected. And that's a much higher standard that you have to achieve in order to get there. There's also another point that has to be addressed. Comes up a lot. A government building is not a private property in the same sense as a building or a business at a home. It's a public property. It exists for the public and the public's use. That doesn't mean there are no rules, but it does mean the government cannot exercise the same level of control over speech that a private property owner could. The government cannot simply say, this is our building, therefore we decide how and who and when someone speaks. The Constitution places limits on that authority for a reason. When a space is open to the public, especially a space that functions as a space for interaction with the government, those limits become real. Very, very, very real. So when someone tries to treat a hallway, a ramp, or any entryway into a city hall as if it's an extension of a controlled meeting, they're applying the wrong framework, folks. Like, they are treating a public space as if it's a limited form. And that's not really supported in any way, shape, or form by the law. And that's where this issue becomes clear, right? Because if you misidentify the form, then everything else that follows is based on the wrong standard. You end up judging speech, in a public space as if it were occurring during a public meeting, and that fundamentally changes the analysis and the way it's not really consistent with how the Constitution is applied. The question is not what was said. The question is where it was said. And because you identify the correct form now, the limits on the government authority become much clearer. And in a public access point inside City Hall, those limits are extremely limited and significant. So, see a couple questions up there, but before we roll into our next section, do you believe the rules of council meeting should follow someone into a hallway or entryway after the meeting ends? I don't. There are rules for a reason in all areas. Where do you think a traditional public forum begins and ends inside a government building, and where does it end? And where does it end? Should City Hall be treated like a private property, or should it be treated as a place where public interaction is expected and protected? Think about it, and when we get, I also didn't want, while you're thinking about it, discuss another little point: disorderly conduct and what it actually requires, right? So this is the part where a lot of people move away from the law and actually says into what they feel about the law should be, right? And those are not the same thing. When people hear raised voices or profanity or see someone speaking in a way that is direct and uncomfortable, the instinct is to call it disorderly. It feels disorderly, right? Everyone thinks I'm disorderly. Sounds disorderly. But the legal question involved is not whether it feels or sounds disorderly. The legal question is whether it meets the statutory definition, and that definition is far more specific than most people realize. ORC 2917.11, right? So that regulates disorderly conduct, requires a particular types of behavior to be achieved. It can be fighting, it can be threatening harm. So if you fight someone, if you say I'm going to XYZ you, or you engage in a conduct that's likely to provoke a violent response. It can include making unreasonable noise, but even then, that is not enough not as simple as just being loud. The statute looks at the context, including the time, the place, the whether the noise was actually unreasonable in those circumstances, and it is not enough for someone that does not like the volume. It has to rise to a level that creates a real public disturbance and is defined by a law. And that is where one of the biggest misunderstandings comes in, especially if the situations involve government officials. Profanity by itself, it's not illegal, folks. You can curse up a storm if you want to. Being loud by itself, that's not illegal. I can be loud as I want. Criticizing a public official is strong terms, not illegal. I can say, fuck you, Ray Carrion. Fuck you, Mayor Bradley. I can say those things with all heart and comment because it's publicly protected speech. Criticizing a public official in strong terms, it's not illegal. Like I said, those things may make them feel uncomfortable. They make you feel uncomfortable. But they may be unpopular. They may not be how everyone would choose to speak, but that is not the standard for the constitutional issues. The First Amendment protects speech that people do not like. That includes profanity. That includes criticism. That includes speech that is directed at the public officials in a direct or a way that is direct and even confrontational. Courts have repeatedly made it clear that you do not lose your constitutional protection simply because your tone is not polite. There is narrow category of speech known as fighting words, but there is one of the most misunderstood concepts in First Amendment law. Fighting words are not offensive words. They're not just profanity. You can say, fuck, fuckity, fuck all you want. But if you say that coupled with a fuck, fuckity, fuck, I'm going to XYZ you, that's not okay. Because they are not just profanity, they're words likely to provoke an immediate violent reaction. Words that are essentially an invitation to a fight, to a face-to-face counter. Even that category has been interpreted very narrowly by the courts over time, like super, super tight. It doesn't apply simply because someone uses strong language or expresses anger. There are cases across the country where courts have addressed it directly. Flipping off a police officer has been held to be protected speech. Using profanity towards an officer has been held as protected speech. Criticizing a public official in a blunt or offensive terms has been held to be protected speech. These are not exceptions. These are examples of how the First Amendment is actually applied in real situations. That goes right back to the difference between the speech and between speech and conduct. Speech, even when it's loud or profane, does not become disorderly conduct unless it crosses into the specific categories defined by law. There's got to be some more, folks. There has to be a threat, a risk of harm, or conduct that goes beyond expression into something that disrupts public safety in a way the statute actually covers. I mean, technically, Mayor Bradley's saying that come back and see me in 2 years when I'm not mayor and see what happens. It might fall out of context because it's 2 years away. Now, maybe when I got closer to the 2 years, I could apply. What is actually happening around that speech matters. If there is a clear difference between interrupting a formal, meeting where where rules are in place to maintain order and speaking to an official in a public space after that meeting has ended. Those are not the same situation. They are governed by the same rules, though. Wait. They aren't governed by the same rules. No, that's right. They aren't governed by the same rules. Sorry, I slipped up there a little bit. And again, the record matters because when officers themselves acknowledge that speaking to officials in a parking lot is legal, which they did on that video that we showed with Fowling and Morris, they're recognizing that distinction. They are recognizing that once you're outside of a structured environment like a council meeting, the ability to speak expands and the government's ability to regulate that speech is reduced. And so the question is not whether the interaction was uncomfortable. It's, I can't go in. It's not whether the language was strong. It's not whether someone would prefer that the conversation didn't happen. The question really always goes down to whether the conduct meets the actual elements of disorderly conduct under Ohio law.
Was there a threat? Was there fighting? Was there a real risk of physical harm? Was there conduct that goes beyond speech into something that creates a public safety issue? If the answer to those questions is no, which it is, then the conduct does not meet the statutory definition, regardless of how labeled it is, or of how balanced it's labeled or how it's labeled. That's where the distinction becomes critical, because then the government does not have the authority to turn protected speech into criminal offense simply by calling it disorderly. The law requires more than discomfort. It requires specific elements, and if those elements are not present, then the speech remains protected. And even if it's loud, even if it's critical, even if it includes language that some people would rather not hear. Now I don't know what to tell you. One last theory here, kind of to talk about on the open forum, because I didn't even pause at the last open forum to kind of look at the questions. It looks like there's still only 2 in there. Do you believe profanity should ever be considered disorderly conduct on its own? Where do you think the line exists between protected speech and fighting words? Do you think criticizing a public official in strong and offensive language should be protected? Think about that. And we're going to slide into another second and then go from there. So stop for a second here and I'll be right back. Hey there, folks. Aaron here at Unplugged with Aaron Knapp. I want to give you a quick reminder for everyone watching that the City of Lorain holds its regular City Council meetings on the first and third Monday of every month. And those meetings are not just for council members. They are for residents. If you care about what happens in your city, and if you speak or want to speak on an issue, ask a question, or simply be present and informed, showing up matters. Participation matters. Even sitting in the room and listening matters. You do not need to be an expert on any of this. You do not need permission to care. You do not need to do anything other than just show up. So check the agenda, folks. Mark your calendar. And if something affects your neighborhood, your family, or your future, take a seat, raise your hand, and make your voice part of the record. Lorain City Council, first and third Monday. Your city, your meetings. Those council meetings start at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and they're held inside of City Hall. Make sure you...
Ohio. I just want to remind people that your voice does matter, and people like that charge should not be in office, in my most humble opinion. You see, he just gets up here and bashes a damn former... Are you going to address the council meeting? I'm talking... So anyways, I'm going to finish what I'm saying because I don't ever come here anymore, and I have a right to. He is, in my most humble opinion, a piece of shit. The city's already no. They need to know. He causes trouble. He's a fucking headache.
Down to all of our departments and assure that as part of our regular checklist that we have for many projects, that we can visit this. This is not a common area because we typically don't waive fees. So it's one of those areas that we'll revisit here as we move along.
Thank you, Mr. Carrion.
Say something? Then why aren't we? Say something? Then why are we? You want to get an attitude? You work for me, Carry On. Yeah, get it. Do it.
Mr. Knapp.
Tom, I probably have to agree with you. Unfortunately, that they really don't give a crap. Multiple things I've done, I thought that they would stop, but they just keep going. So for everybody that wants to know why I keep going, well, that's why. But there's another piece here that we really have to kind of get into and address. Is it goes directly how the law distinguishes between protected speech and something that crosses into a different category. People always focus on that tone, that volume. They focus on whether language sounds aggressive, but the law is not focused on something and how it sounds, right? What the law is focused on is actually being what's actually being communicated, right? And whether it carries real implication of any type of physical harm. In the prior incident, as we, with the mayor, where he said, "Come see me in 2 years when I'm not mayor and see what happens when I flipped him off." And he brings up that I flipped him off but he responded with a threat. It's not his casual language. That statement carries implication. It suggests that only reason that something's not happening now is because the official capacity or position currently that he holds. It suggests that outside of that position, the interaction could be different. It suggests that there is a consequence waiting, not just at that moment. Now, that matters because when courts look at speech, they do not look at whether words were spoken. They look at context. They look at meaning. They look at how a reasonable person would interpret that statement. There is a difference between saying something offensive and then saying something that implies future harm. There is a difference between criticism and intimidation. Those are not the same thing. The law treats them differently. And that's where the idea and concept of true threats will always come into play, because a true threat is not just angry language. It's a statement that communicates a serious expression of intent to commit unlawful violence or harm. It does not have to be immediate. It does not have to be carried out. But it has to be more than vague or rhetorical language. It has to be something that a reasonable person would understand as a real possibility of harm. And the key point here is that the law books, they look at that standard regardless of who is speaking. It does not change just because the speaker is a public official. In fact, if anything, when someone is in a position of authority, the impact of that statement can be greater because there is an inherent power dynamic involved. When a citizen speaks, they are speaking without authority. When an official speaks, especially in setting, tied to their position, like City Hall, their words carry weight in a different way. So when you look at a statement like that, the question is not whether it sounds aggressive. The question is what it communicates. Does it imply that there will be consequences outside the protections of the current position when a mayor becomes not a mayor? Does it suggest that the only thing preventing action is the fact that mayor holds the office? Does it create an expectation that something could happen later? I mean, those are the kind of questions that the law actually asks. This is where the contrast becomes important, because you have two very different types of speech being treated very differently. On one side, you have a citizen and me speaking loudly, asking questions, using strong language, engaging in criticism. That is the type of speech the First Amendment was made to protect 1,000%, even when it's uncomfortable. On the other side, you have statements that implies future consequences tied to a change in status. A statement that can be interpreted as suggesting harm outside of the boundaries of official conduct. That is the kind of statement that the law examines much more closely when determining whether it crosses into something that's not protected. But what often happens in practice is that those standards are applied unevenly. The focus shifts to tone rather than content. It shifts to who is speaking rather than what is being said. A raised voice from a citizen is labeled as disorderly, while a statement from an official that implies future consequences is minimized as frustration or rhetoric. That's not how the legal analysis is supposed to work, folks. Not law advice, but just saying. The law does not ask who is more comfortable, not to be construed as legal advice. It asks what the speech actually is. Like, what are they saying? Is protected expression, or is it something that crosses into a category that the First Amendment does not protect? And that brings us back to the larger point. The standard does not change depending on who is speaking. It does not change depending on who was offended. It is supposed to be applied consistently, because once there's one side's speech is treated as a problem while the other side's statements are ignored or excused, then the issue is no longer about law. It becomes about power and who gets to define what is acceptable. And that is exactly why these distinctions matter, guys. And this is exactly why, here in our next segment, we're going to talk about physical contact and the law of assault. And this is where the conversation has got to shift. Because up to this point, we've really been talking about speech. And speech is protected. Speech can be loud. Speech can be uncomfortable. Speech can be critical. And most of the time, this is where people want to keep that focus, right? Because speech is easy to argue about. It's easy to argue about what someone said. The moment you move from speech to physical contact, that whole analysis changes completely. You're no longer in the First Amendment area. You're in criminal law, right? You're in conduct, and the standards are different. Under Ohio law, assault is defined under Ohio Revised Code 2903.13. It's important to understand how broad that statute actually is. It does not require serious injury. It does not require visible harm. It does not require someone to be knocked to the ground. The statute covers knowingly causing or attempting to cause physical harm. That means even minimal, unwanted physical contact can fall within that definition. And if it does, knowingly and without consent. Now, that's where people often get this wrong. Like, they think if there's no injury, there's no issue. And that's not the law. The law looks at whether the contact itself was intentional and whether it created or attempted to create harm, even at the minimal level. So when people say something like, well, it was just a chest bump, well, the response to that is not emotional. The response is legal. The question is not whether you labeled it and gave it, a friendly label that works, chest bump, like a fist bump. No, the question is how it happened, because context matters. Movement matters. Intent matters. If two people are both moving towards each other, then there's a mutual movement and there's an accidental collision, then that is one type of situation. That's not the same as one person standing in place or another person closing the distance and initiating contact. Those aren't the same. They're not the same facts. And the law treats them differently. But this is where the video becomes critical, because the video does not rely on anyone's description. It shows approach. It shows positioning. It shows whether someone was stationary. I don't know, man. It just feels like whether they were stationary or advancing, it's going to show whether the distance was closed deliberately. I've got the back cam that's going to show from behind, the front cam that shows from the front, the chest cam from the front. I don't think there's any in that hallway, but any videos they may have in that hallway. Because when you watch this back, especially when you slow it down, you see something specific. You see distance, you see movement, and you see that distance disappeared so quickly. You see a turn, a direct movement towards me, and you will see contact. It's not incidental. It's not a brush. It's not someone passing by in a crowded hallway. It sets the stage. It's a direct closing of the space between me and him. That matters, because the law is going to be ready to ask one simple, very, very simple question. Who moved into whom? If one person is stationary and the other person steps into the space that they currently occupy and makes physical contact, then that's not mutual. That is not accidental. That is a choice. And that is exactly the kind of fact pattern that gets analyzed under the assault statute. Now add in the body cam, because the body cam is not just recording audio. It's attached to the person's body. So when you see a jolt, when you see a shift on the camera, you know it's him. And you're just like, ooh, okay. But anyway, you're going to see a shift in the camera. It's not a visual effect. It's him. Boom, hitting me. And that's the evidence of the physical movement. It's the evidence that the contact occurred with enough force to move my camera itself. And you heard it. Does that prove intent? No, not by itself. But in the grand scheme of things, it's part of the reconstruction. It's one piece of a larger picture that includes distance, approach, positioning, and timing, right? And then when you have the doorway, because this isn't happening out in an open field, right? This is happening in a very confined space, an entrance or exit where movement's restricted. There's only so many directions a person can go. That increases the significance of who is advancing and who is blocking. If someone is positioned at a doorway and another person moves into that space, that is not the same as two people crossing paths in a wide open area. The environment matters. The available space matters. The ability to retreat matters. And that leads directly into the second piece of this, which is the door itself. Because you don't just have body to body contact, you also have door to body contact being used in a way that creates a physical impact. A door being closed into someone is not just symbolic, it's physical. It can cause harm. And again, the law doesn't require that the harm be severe. Anyway, it requires that the act be knowing. Did he knowingly hit me with the door with some form of intent? If someone's aware of whether the other person is standing in a spot or not, and if that person is in that doorway and that doorway is closed in a way that makes contact, and that becomes part of the same analysis, it is, another instance of physical contact that has to be evaluated under the same standard. And this is where that prior context matters, because it's not happening in a vacuum. We got prior communications, notice, documented information about a disability, about triggers, about how certain types of conduct can escalate a situation, about, that certain things just don't make someone immune from all interaction, right? But it does increase the expectations that officials act with awareness and restraint. When that awareness exists, the question of whether conduct was knowing or becomes way more, even more relevant in the grand scheme. Because now you're not just asking, yeah, okay, I'll check the comments. Listen. You're asking whether they did so with knowledge of how that contact would affect the other person. And that is a very different question. So before we move to that next section, I'm going to check. Working on it. Yeah, Garen, Tom and I have talked. We've exchanged information. I'm working on running down his story and getting responses. I wrote a story tonight, kind of that levels a little on that. It was one of the questions I asked the Attorney General was, how do we report that constituent being dealt with that way? Let me just see if I can find it out real quick. Hold on. Tom was having a disagreement with his state representative, I believe, if I recall correctly. And I sent out some requests. At the same time, I was dealing with this problem with City of Lorain, or shortly thereafter, which is kind of ironic that it happened the way that it did. But I got this. Let me see if I can get it here. I asked the question of the Attorney General, and they sent a response back. And I don't know if I can actually. I don't think I can actually put it in the chat. We're gonna see. So we'll go. No, we've got it already on there. So. Let me see if I can. I may not be able to post the whole thing, but what I can do is I can. Let me just see. Yeah, it won't let me just drop it in there. So what I'll do is this. And I'm glad you popped in, Tom, because I just got this letter and was reviewing it, and so it just reminds me. I'm going to put a link up. You can view it in PDF form. So we're going to. Ugh. Yeah, it's not going to post on Facebook, but it's posting in any other things because I'm not allowed to post links until after 6:20. Well, what is 6:22? It's past 6:22. But anyway, this is what it says in the letter that I received from the Attorney General's office in regards to my request for Tom to try and get if any, let's see, where did it leave off at? Is a response. Okay, Jesus. I'm trying to get all of this that they sent me copied for you. Ugh. All right, whatever. Look, you see the link in there. Tom, I'll try to send it to you after the show. YouTube's being a little difficult with me right now about posting these as one long comment. It thinks it's spam. But the one thing, as a courtesy to me, they did say this. Let's see, although conduct may be improper. And then this was the last part of that little section. Of course, it's not going to let me list it. It's being difficult, Tom. I sent you. I posted the link to the letter. It didn't go up on Facebook. If you're watching on Facebook, check it out on my YouTube here. You'll be able to see the link in clear view. I'm pretty sure. All right, there's. Bottom line is that I'm having similar issues, yes, as Tom, and Tom and I have been talking. I did get a response back from the Attorney General, at least today, and I did write part of that story, mainly applied it to my situation with the letter, and I'm still waiting on some other answers back from some other officials in regards to your question, Tom. So we're going to get to that as soon as we can. I hope that helps, answer your questions. But yeah, so I do feel you on that, man. And yes, when he asks questions, when others ask questions, we end up running into a lot of problems. And it's unfortunate, because the government doesn't want to answer questions. And this is why we keep ending up in the same situation over and over and over again now. So we basically look at, the fact that none of this is about exaggeration. It's not about inflating what happened. It's about breaking it down to the exact components that the law requires: movement, distance, contact, intent, environment, knowledge. Because once you have those elements, the analysis is no longer subjective. It's structured. It's there. It becomes something that can be evaluated against the statute, not against someone's personal reaction or how they feel about it, right? That's the entire point of doing this way. I will say this much. The reason why there's so many problems with the whole Facebook blocking, all that good stuff, is all of this stuff is within the last 10 to 15 years, decade-wise, as far as case law goes. And a lot of people out here on the East Coast don't even know it yet or haven't even figured it out, or they're just not held accountable to those standards or those laws, and so they just think it's okay. But the law doesn't care what people think something looks like. It cares what actually happened, right? That sequence matters. And that's why at this point the conversation has to shift again. And now we're not just talking about what happened in the hallway or at the doorway. We're kind of talking about what the government did after the fact. And that's where constitutional law becomes unavoidable. Because when the government takes action against a person, the question is never just what they did. The question is why they did it, how they did it, whether they had legal authority to do it at all. And that's where this thing starts to get a little difficult for the city. Because banning someone from a public building, that's not a small decision. And not a casual administrative action. It's a restriction on access to the government. It's a restriction on the ability to attend meetings, to observe, to gather information, and to speak. That's not something that can be done informally or based on preference. It has to be grounded in law, and it has to follow constitutional requirements. First question is simple. What's the legal basis for the ban? Not the explanation, not the narrative, not what someone felt. What is the actual authority that allows the city to exclude a member of the public from City Hall? Because City Hall is not private property. It's not a closed office. It's a public building with public access. It exists for public business, and that matters. The government does have the ability to impose restrictions in certain circumstances, but those restrictions are not unlimited. And they must be reasonable. They must be based on conduct, not viewpoint. And they must follow some form of due process. You do not get to just simply decide that someone is no longer allowed in a public building because you don't like their speech. Or because because some sort of an interaction with them or made you feel uncomfortable. Because that's where the timeline begins to get important again, because the same department that issued the ban is connected to the incident itself. The same authority structure that's involved in the conduct now is the one deciding the consequences. Okay. That raises an obvious question of neutrality, which there is none. It raises a question about whether there's an objective decision based on evidence or a reactive decision based on conflict. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I just caught right in the mic. Put simply, the person whose conduct is at issue is part of the same system that is now deciding whether the other party gets access to the building. Well, that should make you pause, because due process exists for a reason. It exists to prevent exactly that kind of situation, where the government acts as both the subject of the complaint and the decision maker about the consequences. If you're going to restrict someone's access to a public building, there has to be a process. There has to be notice. There has to be an explanation grounded in law. There has to be an opportunity to challenge the decision. Without that, you're not looking at a lawful restriction. You're looking at a unilateral exclusion. Now, then you have to ask yourself what the restriction is actually based on. Because if the underlying conduct is protected speech, and it was, then the restriction becomes even more problematic. The First Amendment does not just protect the right to speak. It protects the right against retaliation for that speech. Remember, guys, the First Amendment does not just protect the right to speak. It also protects against the retaliation for that speech. I'll say it again for the people in the back. The First Amendment does not just protect the right to speak. It also protects against retaliation for said speech. The government cannot punish someone for criticizing officials, and it cannot do indirectly what it is not allowed to do directly. The government cannot punish someone for criticizing officials, and it cannot do indirectly what it is not allowed to do directly. The government, i.e. Ray Carrion, i.e. Jack Bradley, i.e. Tim Williams, cannot punish someone for criticizing those same officials, and it cannot do indirectly what it is not allowed to do directly. You cannot say you are banned when the real issue is that the person is asking questions you don't want to answer. The one thing you said no comment and locked on. And this is where the comparison to other reporters becomes critical, because this was not a situation where access was restricted across the board. They didn't kick out Carissa. They were giving her an interview. And this was not a closed building. This was not a restricted area where no one was allowed to engage. This is where other reporters were present. Carissa was there taking a story from Ray or getting a quote. There were people asking questions. You didn't hear people in the background. There was an ongoing interaction. They're the same official with the same official at the same time. So the question becomes very direct. Well, why was one person allowed to engage while the other one was excluded? So Ray will talk to one reporter, but not the other. Because if the difference is not conduct, but the content, if the difference is not behavior, but the tone, if the difference is not safety, but the criticism, then you're no longer dealing with a neutral role, right? Now you're dealing with viewpoint discrimination, and that's not good. Yeah, I would have to say they do hate us, Karen. That's one of the clearest violations of the First Amendment you'll ever see. The government cannot pick and choose who gets to speak based on whether they like what's being said. Cannot open the door for favorable coverage and close it for critical coverage. That's not how public access works. That is not how the press access works. That's not equal access. And that is not how the Constitution protections work. Now add one more layer, because this is not just any member of the public. This is someone engaged in news gathering. This is someone asking questions, documenting conduct, and recording interactions in a public building. Courts have recognized that news gathering is part of the First Amendment. It's not absolute, but it's protected. I mean, and just to that point, we've been live here for 2 hours and 13 minutes. Newscasts don't go on that long. I'm still providing news. I'm educating, doing way more than the Chronicle's doing on a regular basis. And I'm not one-sided. And when I find out something's needed to be corrected, I correct it. It's not, So when the government restricts access in a way that interferes with activity, the analysis becomes more serious. It's no longer about the access. It's about the ability to document government conduct. And that's where that phrase, "you work for us," matters. Because they do. Because public officials are not private actors. They are accountable to the public, and we are the public. They are subject to scrutiny. They are expected to answer questions, and especially in public spaces, especially after public meetings, especially when those questions relate to public business. That doesn't mean that there are no limits. It does not mean that there are no boundaries. But those limits have to be lawful. They have to be neutral, and they cannot be used as a shield against criticism. So when you look at the situation where physical contact occurs, there is a dispute about what happened, right? Where there is video evidence, and the response is to ban the person who's documented, right?
And the question becomes unavoidable: is that a safety decision, or is that retaliation? Because I've already got a lawsuit against the city and Ray Carry on for retaliation. Because the Constitution treats those two things different. That's going to bring us to section 7, which is where we have this evidence now, these multiple cameras at this stage. Everything comes back to the evidence. So let me quick pause, grab a drink, and we'll be right back. Feed the ducks. Well, we're going to get back into this. We're almost to the end here. As usual, we're going to probably a 3-hour one, I guess. One of the most important things in this situation is that it's not just one piece of evidence, folks. You got multiple cameras, multiple angles, chest, body cameras pointing up, and the one on my back. Now, at the time I was taking care of putting this podcast together, I was saying potentially additional, footage has not been processed, but I kind of let that slip. I feel like the back camera shows exactly what I did and didn't do, and it gives the last piece that I'm not going to give them before they take me to court. Because until they take me to court, it's not evidence that they can see. I let them see the 2 frontal versions. They have a full picture. If they still try to go forward with this and they try to charge me like they did Garen, or they try to keep me banned from City Hall, the back camera finishes the whole picture. It shows that I was not moving forward. It shows that I stopped when he got in my face. It shows who was behind me. It shows the fact that he closed the door on me. You guys have only seen 2 of the 3. I'm not going to give you the 3rd. I'm not going to give you the power to try and come after me. I'm gonna save that last piece for when you come after me. You're gonna see it. So when you have one camera, you have one point of view. The camera shows it from the front, specific angle, specific height, specific field of vision. It can show distance, movement, capture audio, but it's still limited by where it's positioned. That's why a single clip is not enough to fully understand what happened. That's why I carried more than one. So you add in the second one, and it doesn't just duplicate the first. So now we're here, right, and we're here. Oh, it's blurry front screen. And now, again, I have the other one that's back here. So it may capture the approach from a different direction. It shows body positioning that's outside the frame of the first device, the second device. It may reveal whether someone turned, whether someone advanced, whether someone changed direction in a way that's not obvious from a single camera angle. Then you add that third camera, and now you're no longer looking at isolated clips. You got points of reference. You're looking at layered reconstruction of events. That's how incidences are actually analyzed when they matter. You're not going to rely on one piece of footage. You align multiple sources. You look at timestamps. You compare angles. You track movement across frames. You ask whether the evidence is consistent across the perspectives or whether there are contradictions that need to be explained. Consistency matters, folks. Multiple camera angles show the same sequence, the same movement, the same closing of distance. That strengthens the reliability of the evidence. It reduces the ability to reinterpret what happened, and it narrows the range of plausible explanations.
But if there are differences between angles, that matters too, because those differences are not automatically contradictions, because they sometimes are simply the result of a perspective. One camera may show a turn more clearly, or the other one may show proximity. I mean, just look at the James Mauricio cameras that we had, all those different cameras going down the hall showing Mihawk acting a fool. Now, if you just looked at one picture, you might think one thing. If we just looked at one video, then we might think one thing. But when you look at all 7 or 8 or 9 or 12 of them in a row, you go, well, what the hell? This was not good. That bailiff put hands on him and looked like he was trying to do something, Mr. Belt Puller. But because those differences are not automatically contradictions, right? That's why you don't jump to conclusions based on a single clip. You build that timeline. And that timeline is not just about what happened. It's about what is about when it happened. It's about how long each interaction lasted. Did he hit me with a door and then start to walk away after going back and picking up his bag and then start to walk away again before I start to walk up the freaking walkway at the same time as him, and he turned around because I said I would follow him and got right in my face? That's what the video shows, because time is evidence, folks. The speed at which someone moves, the pause in their actions, the sequence of steps, the fact that he walked away after hitting me with the door and carry on, Demakia calmed him down the first time. He picked up his bag and started to leave. Then he turned around, jumped back in my face, and Demakia had to put his hands between us and separate Ray from me. Now, in the process, Demakia is touching me. I never asked anyone to touch me. It really feels like all these people who have deliberately been told by me that they're not to touch me, they're not to jump at me, they're not to get in my face, otherwise they might get a bad reaction, are doing something very intentional to trigger me. And they're just mad that they didn't get what they wanted, because as soon as I gave them that evidence, I knew they'd try to use it against me. So I'm working really hard on fixing that. And I did. So the evidence only matters if it's preserved. If the footage is lost, it's overwritten. If it's not downloaded, and that's secured. So it won't create a gap. So I keep multiple copies, especially when the evidence involves government officials, because there are legal obligations tied to the retention of public records, and especially on videos that they have, like in their lobbies, because videos are recorded in public building during an interaction involving public officials. It's not just personal footage anymore. It can become part of the public record. It can become evidence in a civil case. It can become evidence in a criminal case. Once that is the case, right, there are expectations about how that evidence is handled. That's why documenting timelines matters, and that's why the footage was recorded. That's why, when it was downloaded, who has custody of it, has it been altered, has it been preserved in its original format. These are not technical questions. They're foundation questions that determine whether evidence can be relied on in court. That's why I have multiple angles, because it's not just about what the video shows. It's about whether the narrative matches those videos. It's about whether the statements align with the footage of those videos. It's about whether the claims of movement, claims of following, claims of contact are supported by what can actually be seen. Sure, I say I'm going to follow you. I say I can follow you, but I really just walk up to the edge of the ramp, stop, turn around, and look at Demakia in the face, who's looking at me like a ghost. As I turn around and see White Talk walking out with Carry-On at the far end, turning right through the doorway to exit the building. I wait a 1 Mississippi, a 2 Mississippi, a 3 Mississippi, a 4 Mississippi, and a 5 Mississippi, having conversation with Mr. Carry-On, and then I turn and I leave. When I get outside, I'm standing there in the walkway, and they're out there, and then they want to block the walkway. So you hear me saying, fine, I'll walk outside. I'm not afraid to have this conversation, if that's what you think. And then I go outside to the area that Chief Fowling, then Captain Fowling, and Captain Morris have both stated is legitimate to fling and hurtle basically insults and conversations and yell at our public officials outside and in the parking lot. And that's what I was doing. And yet now they're trying to make that into something, even though they didn't when it was, Jane and Paula. And when you look at what I played earlier on Tia, I flipped the mayor off and that was bad. But when she gets up on and just F-bombs the shit out of me, that was okay. Okay. And, you guys are really screwed. I offered you a settlement for $80,000. I strongly suggest you send it to the insurance company and pay me quickly. Or better yet, I tell you what, somebody, I'm sure Bradley will watch this, but I'm pretty sure that the safety service director has up to $75,000 he can spend discretionary. That's the case. Hold on, I'm pretty sure that it'll be in the comments by the time I get there. What about you, Garen? Do you know how much they get paid? Bottom line is I've got it, and I've submitted the evidence to the court, and they're screwed. I think it's $75K is what they can pay out in the mayor's discretionary fund, up to $75,000. So Mayor Bradley, Mr. Carrion, Mr. Williams, you guys have a discretionary fund, right? There you go. Pay it out, baby. Or send it to the insurance like I asked you to by law. You have to. So the case is going to be decided by evidence and law. If not, anyway, it's already in the courts. The footage is going to show a consistent sequence of events. It will support the claims being made. And as more footage was added from the back, that picture will become clearer, not more confusing. So the next step's not speculation. The next step is to gather every available angle, align the timelines, and let the evidence speak for itself, which is what I've already done. Because in the end, that's the only thing that matters, right? And so I'm going to use this additional footage, and I'm going to use it on what matters most. Because, the government response creates constitutional liability at this point. There has to be a point in this situation, like in any situation, like where the discussion has to move beyond reaction and into precedent. Because it's one thing to say something feels wrong. It's another thing entirely to show the courts, to show that the courts have already addressed something or a type of conduct that's already drawn clear constitutional lines that the government is not allowed to cross, right? And I've got an entire file full of case law, like so much friggin' case law that says I'm right. Like so much case law that says I'm right. If you guys read it, if their lawyers read it. That's why I don't think Tim Williams had permission to send this letter out and they're retroactively backing him, which is why when quoted, Mayor Bradley said if a court of neutral decision decides it, we'll back down. But it's too late. Either Ray instructed, Tim to do it, or Tim just got all, whatever on his own and decided to do it. But now they're stuck because they've done it. They essentially gave me the perp walk without giving me the perp walk that they so desperately want. They desperately want to arrest me. They desperately want to instigate this situation into something physical, and I'm not going to let it happen. Chest bump me, slam doors on me. Hey, man, look, if I can take Santa's fat ass crushing me, I can definitely take a stupid door. So they know what they're doing. What's happening here is nothing new. It's not unique. And what they're trying to do is not unique. Courts across the country have repeatedly addressed the situation where individuals were removed from public spaces, restricted from speaking, excluded from government buildings, or retaliated against for criticizing public officials. And while the facts in each case are never identical, the principles that control those cases are very, very, very consistent. And the principles are what matter. And the settlements matter. Every single one of them settles out of court for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 80. One of the clearest lines in modern First Amendment law is that the public has the right to observe, document, and question government officials performing their duties in public spaces. And that's not a courtesy extended by the government. It's something that cannot, be revoked because it becomes uncomfortable for the government. It is a recognized constitutional activity that sits at the core of what the First Amendment protects. In Index Newspapers, LLC versus the city of Portland, the Ninth Circuit Court addressed this directly in the context of journalists and observers recording the police activity in public spaces, i.e. Mr. Mauricio. You can see Mr. Mauricio at justification, but the C is SEE on YouTube here. You see him posting in there. If you check out his channel, maybe go over and subscribe, add, like. Speaking of which, if you guys aren't subscribed or added to this channel, you should. But the court explained that recording government officials is not separate speech. It's part of the speech itself, because gathering news information is a necessary step, right? A necessary step in communicating that information to the public. And whether or not all public likes it, I know we tell a lot of public doesn't. They come in and they trash me all the time on pages. They get in my comment section. Again, that's why I don't respond to anybody. I'm not allowed to right now. Enough people probably complained or whatever. But the principle matters here, because what was occurring was not a passive presence. It was active news gathering. That's what I was doing. It was questioning a public official in a public building about public conduct. And when the government interferes with that activity, the analysis is not neutral. The government must justify that interference under constitutional standards. From there, the analysis moves directly into retaliation, because the law does not allow the government to take adverse action against a person because they engaged in what we consider protected speech. It's not a gray area. It's a well-established, well-pointed-out principle. If someone criticizes a government official, asks questions, records conduct, or publishes any information, the government cannot respond by punishing that person for doing so. Courts have consistently held that a retaliation claim exists when three elements are present. The individual engaged in protected activity. I did. The government took an adverse action against them that would deter a person of ordinary firmness, and there was a casual connection between the two. And in cases involving trespass warnings or exclusions from public property, courts have made clear that even a warning without an arrest can qualify as an adverse action. Thank you. Appreciate that, by the way, because getting arrested would have sucked. This way I don't have to get arrested. That's important, because what's at issue here is not a temporary removal or momentary disruption. It's a written exclusion from a public property, which is broader, more restrictive, and it has direct impact on the ability to attend meetings, gather information, and engage with public officials. It was also hand delivered by a three striper, mailed to me apparently, and as well as certified mailed me. But just like with the stuff that the Lorraine police tried to certify mail me before, my mailman never knocks on the door. He just drops the certificate off. And so I'm never going to get it that way. Not that I care to get that from you. But if I could, I would, because it's just a certified proof that you did what you did. Well, on one of them, they handed it to me. They mailed another one with no stamp that has a little bar across it. But the one they mailed that's sent through registered mail, as Bradley said, will come to my door. And I know my mailman, he leaves the brown certificate. I don't care. But the bottom line is it applies to the motion. It applies at the motion to dismiss stage. The question is whether or not the claim is proven. It's whether the plausibly was based on facts, right? And so the analysis does not stop at the First Amendment, because the government bars someone from public property. It implicates due process under the 14th Amendment. And exclusion from a public building is not a speech issue, folks. It's a deprivation of a liberty interest. And when the government deprives someone of that interest, a liberty interest, it must provide some form of process, that due process. That means notice, opportunity to be heard, and a clear standard that explains what conduct triggered the action. Courts have allowed due process claims to move forward where individuals were excluded from public property without meaningful procedural protections. And that is the critical question here. What process was provided? Was there notice of a specific rule? Was there an opportunity to challenge the decision? Was there a neutral decision maker? Or was the action taken immediately by the same authority involved in the actual underlying incident? Because when the government acts without process, the issue is no longer simply whether the decision was correct. The issue becomes whether the decision was constitutional at all. The location of the conduct also matters, and this is where the public forum doctrine becomes extra critical. The government's ability to restrict speech depends heavily on where that speech is occurring at, folks. A structured city council meeting is typically treated as a limited public forum where reasonable viewpoint neutral restrictions can be imposed to maintain order. I want to take a quick brief statement on that from me. But out of everything that's happened in those meetings, I have never once been the asshole that's yelling out in the middle of that public meeting. A couple of times I've had to yell out after you adjourned it because you adjourned it for me. One time I had to respond to Joel because he was yelling at me to sit down. But I'm always responding to you folks when you decide to yell at me through your mics like it's some sort of a, vaudeville and you're throwing popcorn on the stage. Not how this works. I'm not subject to your rules, to your meeting. The only thing I'm subject to is the Ohio Revised Code, which states I can't disrupt a meeting. And disrupting a meeting isn't getting up, changing positions, standing up, or mumbling under my breath. And none of those things gives you a right to address me without going to the chair. None of those things gives you a right to yell at me. And none of those things gives you a right to ask me any questions, nor does it obligate me to respond to them. But if you do ask the questions, I can respond. And I have told you what I'll do, and you continue to do it. For the people on the Lorraine page that always love to try and poke at me, and right now, and they're going, oh, what, no response, tagging me. I can't respond right now. But in the grand scheme of things, when you say things like, oh, is this post working out how you expected it? Absolutely. I never expect support from anyone in Lorraine except for the people I know are going to support me that share a standard viewpoint of me. I don't share it to get your support. I share it to put pressure on the government to act a certain way. Because while certain people may not support it, there are many, 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 many intellectually like individuals who are I don't know how to basically people that got the smarts on this, right? Let's just go simple. People that understand how this stuff works, understand how the Constitution works, understands how public spaces work, gets that whole theory. Could I do what I did in that hallway to Mr. Demakia anywhere other than city property? Probably not. Even in the government parking lot out there, I can do it. But if I saw Mr. Demakia at his local grocery station and harangued and harassed him like that, it might be a different question, even though paparazzi do it all the time. But it would be inappropriate, and I wouldn't do it, and I never have. I see him at the school. I see him out and about. I see people other places. I never come at them that way. That building is the only building where I feel empowered and legal enough to make those kind of statements and challenges to people, because that's where you should make them, in the most traditional of places to be a public forum, a city hall. And again, once the meeting ends, it changes. So the hallways, the lobbies, the ramp, the entryways, the exitways, the place I always walk out, they're not governed by those same rules. And the courts have repeatedly recognized that the general access areas of those government foyers and buildings and all that area, that's where the First Amendment protections come in. And that's where the government cannot simply extend meeting rules into those spaces. Because in like Peltz v. Los Angeles, City v. Los Angeles, the court examined restrictions imposed in areas connected to government property and focused on whether those restrictions were reasonable in light of the purpose of the space. Once the meeting ends, the purpose of the space changes. It becomes a place of public access, not controlled deliberation. And the government's authority to regulate speech is reduced, not expanded. That matters here because the interaction occurred in the general access area of City Hall, at a point of entry and exit, not within a controlled environment of a meeting. Another critical factor that the courts examine is whether similarly situated individuals were treated differently, because selective enforcement can support a claim of retaliation or viewpoint discrimination. The law does not allow the government to apply rules to one person while applying other rules to engage the same conduct. Two individuals are asking the same questions, or asking questions, I should say, of the same official in the same space, i.e. Clarissa and me, both asking questions of Ray Carrion. I started my questions inside the hall before Clarissa even started talking to him. He ignored me and walked outside, at which point I walked outside and into the hallway and asked the same questions. But if two individuals are doing the same thing and one is excluded ultimately from the building for it, that's not a minor detail. That's comparative evidence. And then that person who wasn't excluded writes the news story about it, saying it was all good. It shows that the conduct itself was not prohibited. It raises the question of whether the difference in treatment was based on the content or tone of the speech rather than the neutral rule. Courts take that analysis seriously, folks, because the First Amendment does not permit the government to favor one speaker over another, or one news reporter over another. That becomes viewpoint discrimination. If he is giving a statement in a public setting, in a public area, and he's giving it to another news reporter, and I'm present, then that gives me the right to actually hear it as well. And so when that contact happens, it goes beyond the normal. It involves a government official acting under color of law. The analysis expands beyond the ordinary assault considerations. And Gunasekera, I'm probably spelling that or saying that wrong, but it's Gunasekera versus Irwin. The court addressed claims involving physical interaction by government officials and evaluated whether the conduct was objectively reasonable under the circumstances or whether it violated clearly established rights. That framework applies here, folks, because the question is not simply whether the contact occurred. The question is whether any use of physical force, even minimal, was justified under the circumstances. If the underlying interaction involved protected speech, that context matters. If the contact occurred in response to that speech, that context matters even more. The Constitution does not permit that, does not permit the use of physical force as a response to protected expression without justification. Justification. And when force is used, that context courts evaluate it under constitutional standards, not just state law, right? I know this is some boring shit, guys. As Garen pointed out, I even felt like I was a little while ago. Another case that I went through was Calstrom v. City of Columbus that highlights a related principle that focuses on the government's responsibility when its actions place individuals at risk. In that case, the court recognized that the government conduct that exposes individuals to harm or creates a foreseeable risk can implicate constitutional protections. While the facts are different, the principle is relevant because when the government takes targeted action against a specific person, individual, or reporter, whether through exclusion, disclosure, or enforcement, the courts examine whether the action is justified, whether it's proportional, and whether it respects constitutional limits. It's not enough for the government to simply act. It must act lawfully. When you take a step back and look at these cases together, the consistent pattern emerges. The courts protect the right to observe and document government conduct. Courts protect the right to criticize public officials. Courts scrutinize exclusions from public property, especially when those exclusions affect access to government. Courts require process when rights are restricted. Courts analyze retaliation carefully, particularly when the adverse action shows protected speech. And courts do not allow the government to justify its actions based on discomfort, disagreement, or narrative alone. That's where the thread runs through all of this. Because what is at issue here is not just a single interaction in a hallway. It's a sequence of government actions that include physical contact, a disputed narrative, that movement, and a formal exclusion from the public body that can directly impact the ability to engage in news gathering by yours truly and public participation by yours truly. When those elements are presented together, courts don't treat that as routine. They treat it as conduct that must be justified under the Constitution. And if that justification is not present, it creates exposure to liability. Justification. Go to his YouTube. Sorry, I'm obsessing. So at this point, the framework's not theoretical. The questions are established. Was the speech protected? Yes. Was the government response an adversarial action? I would argue yes. Was there a lawful basis for the exclusion? I would say no. They even admit there wasn't one in their own response to the article. Was there due process? No. And that's the thing. Bradley says, well, he'll give, he'll subject himself to due. Well, they're saying they'll agree with whatever due process comes up, but they gave me no option for that. And it's just funny because when you request and look at it deeper, you go, okay, well, you gave no due process. That's the problem. That directly makes it one of the commitments of retaliatory acts. And now it goes from just Ray and a couple of others to a lot of people within the city, including Tim Williams, including a second one against Ray Carrion, including one against Mayor Bradley. I mean, the fact that this went onto the news, all these things. So 80 grand. I mean, look, again, hold on. 75, I think, Garen, right? 75 or so, whatever that back, whatever that high minimum is that you guys can pay out for just this one case that I'm dealing with, I'll take. Because ultimately, it questions whether was any physical contact justified, and ultimately did the government stay within the limits that the Constitution places on it. Those will be the questions the courts will ask every time, regardless of the narrative, regardless of the personalities involved, regardless of whether they're government or not, regardless of how the situation is described after the fact. And that's where the motive moves, where this moves next, right? The explanation to accountability. Because once the law's on the table, once the only thing is left to apply is the facts. So, I filed some stuff in the courts, and at some point, a situation like this stops being about a single incident, starts being about the record. Not a narrative, not an argument, not a clip in the moment. Structured, documented, filed record that's placed in front of a court. And that's what I did. So, I'm not going to get too deep into it, but it's a developing litigation record that includes a complaint, a motion for injunctive relief, an affidavit, and a support filings that together define the scope of what's being alleged. I put together, things that will matter for the court, and that distinction matters because once something's filed, it's no longer just a conversation, right? They all said it has to be filed, so I filed it. I made a claim that invokes the authority of the court, as they said. And what has been filed, it's not here is not like super narrow. It's not limited to one moment of physical contact. It's not limited to one exchange. It's a broader, more than that. It's framed in a way that was very intentional. The filing places the conduct within a larger pattern of behavior involving access to public records, access to public property, the treatment of a journalist engaged in news gathering, and the response of the government officials to criticism and documentation. That's how constitutional litigation is built. That's not built on isolated facts. It's built on patterns, timelines, and repeated actions that, when viewed through together, raises constitutional questions. The sad thing about all this is, really quick, is that Carissa should be supporting me. Carissa should realize that this could directly affect her and her news agency in the future. What if they report something they don't like and they ask her to leave? But instead of supporting a fellow journalist, she's decided to side with the people that she is there to report on. Got it. Somebody's gone native. The complaint for declaratory and injunctive relief I filed is going to set the stage. And as Heather Chapin thought I filed a police report. I did not. I went down and filed a report with the court a motion with the court. Because why would I go to the police? They've proven that they're inept and they can't investigate their own supervisors. So, and they won't. And the sheriff's department is just as inept. So when I go to them, they're just going to lose the evidence and then blame it on me. Can't send it to the Ethics Commission because they don't review that. God forbid they actually review something that's ethical. So I'm asking the court to declare what the law requires and to prevent ongoing future violations. That's forward-looking, folks. This is not about preventing harm, not about just addressing what has already occurred. The motion for a temporary restraining order takes it one step further. It tells the court that the harm is not hypothetical, that it's ongoing, and that immediately relief is necessary to prevent further injury. That's a high standard, and it requires a showing that there's a likelihood of success on the merits and irreparable harm in this and what's occurred. And the balance of equities favors that intervention. Then my affidavit, it's not an argument, it's a sworn testimony. It's a statement made under oath that the facts contained within it are the best of my knowledge. And in that case, the affidavit establishes my personal knowledge, it identifies me as the plaintiff, it lays the factual foundation for the grounds being made, and it's a bridge between what happened and what's going to be alleged in court. It turns events into evidence. I also filed for a fee waiver because I'm broke. And that's not just a procedural step, it's part of the record. It reflects the reality of bringing litigation as an individual against the government entity. It reflects the imbalance of resources that often exists in these cases. And it places the issue directly before the court. The financial disclosure that I provided lays out my income, my assets, everything. And then to top it all off, and I put in evidence. I submitted an entire thumb drive with evidence. Video, audio. And the record's not just about that one day. Prior interactions. It includes prior complaints. It includes prior allegations of retaliation, denial of access, and interference with news gathering and civil rights. It includes claims that this is not an isolated incident, but part of a broader pattern of conduct directed at a specific individual, me. When the courts see that kind of record, they usually don't treat it the same way as a one-off dispute. They analyze whether there's a pattern of behavior that implicates constitutional protections, and that's where the long-term aspect becomes critical. This case does not exist in a vacuum. It sits alongside other filings, other court filings, federal lawsuits, state lawsuits, or county level lawsuits, which are basically state level, and other disputes and other documented interactions with this very same government entities. And it sits at a broader context where the same individual and Ray Carrion is repeatedly involved in public records litigation, First Amendment issues, and disputes over access to public forums. That history can matter. Not to prove that one side's right or wrong, but to prove the context for whether the conduct at issue is part of a continuing course of action. And that's where the focus becomes important. When the government actor takes action against a citizen, me, the question is not just how it happened or what happened, but whether that action is general or targeted. Is the rule being applied to everyone, or is it being applied to me? Is the response based on conduct, or is it based on who I am and the content of my speech? When the same individual is repeatedly involved in disputes with the same officials, me and them, courts will look very closely at whether this reflects a pattern of enforcement or a pattern of retaliation. That's not speculation. That's a standard part of the constitutional analysis. And it now ties directly into what happens next, because once these filings are done, hold on, I got to text my mom. Mommy wants to be texted every day, so I text her every day to let her know I'm still alive. She says, with all the stuff you're doing with the police, I want to make sure you're alive and not in jail. And the government and whatnot. And it's funny, my mom's a diehard Democrat, and I'm a Republican, and we have some conversations, but she gets why I'm doing all this. So all this ties into what's going to happen next. And what's going to happen next is the defendants, the city of Lorain, Mayor Bradley, and Ray Carrion and Tim Williams will all have to respond. They may file a motion to dismiss, arguing that the complaint fails to state on a claim, which they do quite often. They may assert immunity under Ohio or federal law. They may challenge the facts. They may argue the conduct was justified. The court will then evaluate whether, taking the allegations as true, the plaintiff has stated a plausible claim for relief. At that stage, the court's not deciding whose rights, deciding whether the case can proceed. If the case proceeds, discovery follows. Well, that's where the emails, the internal communications, the policies that I have, the ones that show Ray Carrion actually initiating with Mary Springowski over 2 years ago, stating that they were looking for a legal methodology to get rid of me and my constant complaints and questions. That shows, intent, prior knowledge, conspiracy to commit against federal crimes. You guys conspired to commit federal civil rights violations against me, and you've done it. And now I can tie you guys in with a bunch of other people. And this is, again, when I told Garen in the beginning how it all starts. This is how you get the rats to jump the ship and eat each other. This is why the county commissioners are fighting with the sheriff, and the sheriff's fighting with the county commissioners, and the prosecutor's office is fighting with the county commissioners, and the county commissioner's office and the sheriff and the prosecutor's office are fighting with me and arguing with other people. I mean, this whole place is a battlefield right now. If this case proceeds, though, discovery will follow. That's where the emails are all going to come out, folks. That's where we get these broader record expansions. That's where the question of intent, policy, and practice becomes central. Because constitutional cases are not often decided solely on what happened in the moment, but what matters and whether it reflects a broader practice. And that just brings us all full circle. And I want you guys to understand, on this one, I'm the attorney. Okay, so this one that I just brought, I'm pro se. And trust me, you think Bob's bad? I'm way worse than Bob. I'm going to ask for everything. And I have a right, because you guys have stretched yourselves a little thin. So I'm going to get all the emails, and I'm not going to have to play this BS game of suing you multiple times in the court to get records. You're going to give them all to me. We're going to show how you, Mary Springowski, the other council members that were on back then, and law enforcement, and Ray Carrion all conspired with the mayor and other entities within the government to somehow effectively go after me. And you see it clear as day in the emails. Ray Carrion clearly says that the administration is seeking ways to legally deal with me, and this was 2 years ago. Fast forward to today. I don't care what you guys say about, Aaron this, Aaron that. How about it's part of the record. It's going to be evaluated. It's going to be reviewed under the First Amendment and due process. It's all going to be exposed. And that's all I've been wanting the entire time. Because once it reaches that point, it's no longer about narrative. It's about what the Constitution is and whether it was followed or not, folks. That's it. And I guarantee you it wasn't. At this point, the question is no longer just what happened. The question is what the law requires when something like this happens repeatedly and when it's documented. And then when, what does it mean when one interaction becomes part of a larger record? What weight should prior incidences carry when evaluating new? How should the courts evaluate patterns versus isolated events? What happens when an individual continues to document, file, and challenge the same government actors over time? Because this is where we are now. It's not a conversation; it's a case. That brings us to our closing segment here tonight. And at this point, everything's been put up, on the table in a way that most conversations rarely are. The facts have been laid out in sequence. The video has been discussed from multiple angles. The law has been explained, not an opinion, but as a written and interpreted by the courts. And again, if you haven't seen the videos, check them out. I put them out. If you subscribe to my Substack, and here's the thing I've been telling people lately is, so I was phasing out the Substack, but I kind of decided to keep it in play. Because even though it doesn't have the link that the WordPress does, I can get a lot of information out the emails, and a lot of people told me they like to read them, have them directly sent to them. So if you subscribe to the Substack, then you'll definitely get all of my stories from now on pretty much right up front. And so I believe I'm going to just, So this is, I have the WordPress, right? But I also have a Substack, and a lot of people forget that all the time. It's not gonna go to Facebook, but it'll be on here, and you guys will see it. Or it might now. I don't know if it's late enough. But that's my Substack. If you guys go to the Substack, not on Facebook, but it posted here. So if you guys go to the Substack and you sign up to that Substack right there. Sign up to the mailer. Make sure it's not put in your spam file. Every time I post a story, you'll get a copy. Even if it's just a link to the WordPress, you'll get a copy. So I strongly suggest you go there, sign up, and put your email if you want to read these stories as they come out. Go to https://Lorraine Politics Unplugged. That's substack.com/. That's my Substack page. That Substack page has an opportunity. You click on one of the stories, or you get one, or you find one. It's going to ask you if you want to subscribe. Say yes. Simple as that. Give it your email address. You're not going to get, ads from me or any BS like that. All you're going to get is when my story publishes, you'll get a copy. It'll give you the opportunity to click on it and go to the Substack. It'll give you an opportunity to click on it and go to my WordPress as well, probably. So, strongly suggest you do that. But as I said, it's been discussed. The filings are in. We're before the court. It's no longer just what someone else thinks happened. It doesn't matter what anyone in the public forum say. I don't really give a shit what anyone in the Lorraine forum says about me, or talks about me, or questions my military status, or says I'm a whiny bitch, or says I'm a crybaby, or asks me, what this is all about after never following me, or says I'm just out to get money, or says I'm out to just harass officials, or says whatever. Doesn't matter. I'm not here to win a popularity contest. I'm not here for your entertainment. I'm not here for other than to get the job I set out to do done. I'm on a mission. I was sent here by obviously some sort of a direction. And it's the beginning of something that continues whether anyone is watching it or not. What we're talking about here is not just one moment in a hallway, not just one interaction, not just one video. It's part of a much larger pattern that I've been documenting and has been building over time. And that pattern is now documented. It's in emails, it's in public records, it's in complaints, it's in videos, it's in affidavits, and it's in court filings that are going to be front and center moving forward. That matters because once something is in the court, the standard changes. no longer about who can speak the loudest. It's no longer about who can frame the narrative the best. It's no longer about who can clip a video and push it online. It becomes about evidence, procedure, the law. It becomes about whether the Constitution was followed, whether due process was provided, and whether the actions taken by the government can be justified under the standards that apply to them, right? And that's where the long-term picture comes into focus, because this case does not exist in isolation. There are other filings, there are other disputes, there are other records, and this is how those interactions have unfolded over time. There's a documented history of requests, complaints, responses, and actions taken by the same officials and the same entities. When you step back and look at the whole, the question really becomes whether this is a one-time situation or whether it reflects something broader. And that's not a small question. That's the broad question, right? That's the whole question. That's the big question. That's because the law treats isolated incidences differently than it sees patterns. And when the same individual continues to be the subject of enforcement, me, exclusion, me, or targeted action, me, courts do not ignore that. They look at it. They ask why. They look at the timing. They look at the motive. They look at whether the conduct is being applied equally or whether it's being applied selectively. And that's where the accountability comes in, because accountability is not just a word people use when they're upset. It has meaning in the legal system. It means that when the government acts, it has to justify those actions under the Constitution of the United States of America, and in the case of Ohio, the Constitution of the state of Ohio. And it means that it cannot restrict speech simply because it's uncomfortable. It means that it cannot exclude someone from public property without a lawful basis and without due process. It means that it cannot treat one person differently from another simply because it doesn't like what they're saying or what they're asking. And when those lines get crossed, the place where that gets resolved is not in our comment section. It's not on Facebook. Kind of glad that it did block me from responding to you guys, because for the record, I'm not going to go back and respond to any of those demeaning questions. I'm not here to debate this in the public. I shared with the video so you know what was going on. And for those that want to know, they're there. It's there for them. For the rest of the people that are naysayers in the comment section, I don't really care. Oh, wait, sorry. It's a courtroom. That's where it goes now. It's in the courtroom. It's going to be motions, responses. It becomes arguments whether the complaint states a claim. They're gonna get it all out there, right? And at the center of all of that are the same questions. I guarantee you, the first thing they're going to say, no claim on which relief can be granted. It'll come down to this: was the speech protected? Yes. Was the conduct lawful? Yes. Was the response justified? Absolutely not. And was there due process? No. Was there retaliation? Yes, most definitely. 1,000, 5,000, 10,000%. Those questions do not change depending on who's watching or what narrative is being pushed. They're the same questions the courts ask every time. That brings us back to me every single time, because it isn't just about one person, though. It's not just about one incident. It's about what it means to walk into a public building, to ask questions of public officials, to record what happens, and to expect the rules to apply the same way to everyone. It's about what it means to criticize government without being removed, excluded, or physically confronted. It's about what rights actually mean when you try to use them. So now the conversation opens up, right? You see, when you watch the video from the beginning to end, not just the part someone showed you. If you go back and look, what you think at that point matters more? The words that were said or the movement that happened before the words? What do you think the law actually requires when someone is speaking to a government official in a public building? What do you think should happen when the interaction crosses from speech into physical contact? And then into exclusion from that very same building by the very same people that you were questioning. Because reasonable people can disagree about what they saw, right? They can disagree about the tone. We can all go online and disagree about how you would have reacted or how I reacted or what is reaction or whether my reaction was appropriate or not. But the big question is, was the law followed? Because the law is not based on your comfort. It's based on the preference. It's based on the standards that apply to everyone, including the government. So I need a haircut. It's making me itch. This is where those standards are tested, folks. And that's not the end of the conversation. It's not even close. This is one part of a much larger process that continues through filings, through evidence, through the courts. It continues through documentation, through reporting, and through public accountability. Whether you agree with me or not, it doesn't really matter.
Whether you think this goes too far or whether it goes far enough doesn't really matter. The one thing that should matter to everyone in these rules or this situation is if these rules apply equally. And that is when government acts. It stays within the limits of the Constitution placed on it. Because if those limits do not mean anything when they're tested, then they don't mean anything at all. And on that note, I would literally say then everything you're fighting for, everything you're arguing no longer matters. The only thing that matters is our constitutional protections. The only thing that matters is our ability to know the laws and the rules that govern us as citizens of this great United States of America. And whether these people like what I'm saying or not, whether they think I'm, valid as a veteran, whether they question my time in service. I mean, I usually find assholes that question my time in service usually didn't serve at all. But it's all on the wall behind me. I got an honorable discharge. It wasn't some 2-week bullshit. I'm service connected. I don't know what else to tell you guys. I guess only certain veterans matter in certain people's eyes. I got you. But in the grand scheme of things, this is exactly what was supposed to happen. I've told them all along. It was never really supposed to be Garen that got arrested. It was supposed to be me. But they were scared of me. And when they couldn't really get Garen, now they're finally going to come after me. I mean, Dave Vanderschmode, whatever, the freaking building engineer, watches my videos all the time. If they just asked him, he would have told them, as a Briar Rabbit, I've just been sitting here begging people to lock me up so that we can get to the point of deciding whether what they're doing is constitutional or not. Because nobody else is going to do it. Right? It's not going to happen. And the reason why it's not going to happen with those people is because they don't want to fight me on that, because they know I have the knowledge and I have the ability to fight them. I'm looking for something. See if I can find this real quick. So I always... This cartoon is really not a PC cartoon, so to speak. They don't do these movies anymore, right? But I'm gonna see if I can. So we're gonna share screen, and this is something I tell all my friends. I tell Garen and several people that they should again, you can't, I don't think you can find this movie anymore, but they should find this movie and watch it just for this part, because the movie itself is considered kind of antiquated and has some racist overtones, so that's why we don't watch it. But this part is a fable. It's about Briar Rabbit, a rabbit who gets caught. And I always tell everybody, you have to look at me.
Nobody learned it too late. But it just goes to show you what comes of mixing up with something you got no business with in the first place. And don't you never forget it.
How did Brer Rabbit get away, Uncle Remus?
Who say he get away?
Brer Rabbit always gets away.
Don't you be too sure. Ain't I done told you that Brer Rabbit being little without much strength, he's supposed to use his head instead of his foot.
Did he? Sure he did.
Now who's telling this here tale?
You are.
Then you just sit and do the listening. Well, sir, there he was, sitting in the middle of the road, just like you sitting in that chair. Only he was all mixed up with that tar baby. And it sure looked like the end of the finish for poor little Brer Rabbit. Cause old Brer Fox was fixed to barbecue him for dinner, right then and there.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just in a minute now. Won't be long now. Dinner going to be ready in a minute now. All you have to do is put a few more sticks on the fire. Get fire going good. Oh, excuse me. You just going to stay for dinner, ain't you, Brer Rabbit? We ain't want to take no excuses now. We just love to have you for dinner. Wouldn't we just love to have him for dinner, Brer Bear? Ain't that just what you've been saying?
No, sir. What I said was, I'm gonna knock his head clean off.
No, indeed, not that. No, stop. Wait, no, wait a minute. No, you can't do that. No.
I just realized that's probably going to get me a copyright ban. I can't put that up. So I'll have to adjust that later. Look, let me just give you the theory to the story here is that this guy, this rabbit dude here, and this fox and this bear, the fox and the bear want to eat him. They're going to cook him up for dinner, kind of like the old stories with Bugs Bunny and whatnot. And this guy, this rabbit, he's saying to these two guys, like, look, you can do whatever you want to me. Just don't throw me in that briar patch. It's a bramble of thorns, right? And again, you get to the end and he gets all mad and he throws him in this bramble of thorns. And the bramble of thorns is what is supposed to hurt him, right? And so we do. I'm not going to play it because I'm going to probably catch a ban again on the other one. But when you look at this, this is supposed to be what the thorns look like. So, he tells them, do anything but that. Do anything but that. Throw me anywhere but there. Now, I go to city council all the time. I tell them what's going on. And I literally am saying, hey, well, in my case, I just say arrest me. I don't say don't arrest me. But that's been my argument all along. It's like, I can't expect other people to do what I'm not willing to do. I can't expect the Garen Petties of the world to go out and fight a fight on my behalf. I appreciate Nikki offered to go run my body cam at City Hall for me, and I appreciate that. But the next person up for bat in this whole scenario is me. If those that are like, TJ Asire said it best when she said, do you think that's going to stop him? No, TJ, you're right. It's not. In fact, this has been my goal all along. Because as they said in the gun case, and they've taught me better than anyone else the city of Lorain has, I learn from my adversaries. I always do. Okay? And the one thing I've learned from my adversaries is this, is that in this town, I'm going to move this over here so I can see, but in this town and in this state, there's certain ways to do things and to run things. And I just realized this is the way to do it. You got to come straight at them. You got to ask the hard questions. You got to write the hard stories. You look at the state of Ohio and you look at Householder on down, and you guys are a shit show. Have been for a while. It's not your fault. I guess in some cases it might be, but depending on what your role is in the government or within the structure of people, it's not the common citizen's fault, that's for sure. And I just don't understand why no one sees that. Everyone wants to bash me. They want, you're crazy, you're unhinged, you're this. Look, just because I don't approach things the same way you do doesn't mean I'm crazy or I'm unhinged. Yeah, sure, I have PTSD. Yeah, sure, I react a certain way when someone slams the door on me or gets in my face. But I don't punch them in the face. Yeah, I get mad when fat people lay on top of me and try to crush me and kill me. But, I don't even know where I'm going on that. Like, all I know is that this has gone on long enough in this city, just like this podcast has gone on long enough. And all I can say is it's time it stopped, and it's going to stop. And if I have to go there with a camera and get arrested so that they have to pay me a bunch of money and then they have to, learn their lesson the hard way, that's what's going to happen. You can be mad at me, you can be mad at them, but I will get paid. Because of their stupidity, because that's the only way they understand it. People go, oh, you're just trying to get paid. Well, look, that's the only way to hold the government accountable. They literally have qualified immunity. Nothing I can do. The only way to hold them accountable is through your tax dollars, because then you won't want to reelect them. Change it. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm on a mission. We're going to do it. We're going to take care of it. We're going to get this handled. We're going to get it done. And the city of Lorain just sped up the timeline by about 6 months by giving me this letter. And I truly believe that this letter will be, it basically is that insinuation that they needed to give me. And so they just sped up the timeline, gave me an easier way to do it. And more than likely, I won't even get the opportunity to challenge it, because by the time the next meeting rolls around, I'm hoping that Judge Cook will have acted on that temporary restraining order, because unlike my attorney, I'm not very patient. I'm going to be down there annoying people until I get what I need. So I'm banned from municipal buildings, not county buildings. We haven't gotten there yet. And again, illegally banned, might I add. Illegally banned by these people. Ray Carry-On is a big, big bully. I mean, that's all he's ever been, and that's all he'll ever be. Just remember, this is, you're supposed to feel safe in your building, right? Your safety service director is supposed to protect you. This is your safety service director smiling at you creepily right before he turns to walk away. This is his nostril. That's just how close he got. That camera's on my shoulder, so it's looking up at his face. He was that close to me. So that camera's right here, and he's right here. Look. How many of you would let a man get that close to you? I think you wanted to kiss me. Miss Carry-On, you better watch out. I think your hubby is like starting to get a little fresh with me. Maybe you need to be mean to him at home. Maybe he likes to be talked down to a little or something, like I talk to him. So maybe be a little more aggressive at home, and maybe he'll want to kiss you instead of me. But either way, it looks like last time I had a man that close to me, like I told him, I at least have the common courtesy to give a dude a reach around. You're gonna sit there and you're gonna grab me like that. You're gonna get in my face like that. You're gonna chest bump me. You're gonna do whatever you're gonna do. You're gonna get that close. Give me a dance. Give me a kiss. Give me a massage. I don't know. It just felt really, really invasive. So that being said, folks, I appreciate you tuning in tonight. This has been an extra long one, and we'll see you guys next time. For the meantime, law enforcement, be lawful, not awful. And the rest of you guys, thank you for tuning in, and go subscribe to our page and subscribe to all of my channels. And if you can, right up there in the left corner, scan that barcode, and you can donate to the cause. In the meantime, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Look at my hair. I used to shampoo.
Hold on, please. I'm just.
Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask. Unplug with Knapp. Yeah, we cut through the noise. No script, no leash, no polish decoys. Broadcasting without permission. We don't ask. We lift the curtain and we drop the mask.